the meeting of the Education and Pupil Services Committee will please come to order. I will now turn over the Education and Pupil Services Committee agenda to co-chair Mrs. Curry.
Good evening. The Education and Pupil Services Committee meeting will come to order. Tonight we have quite a few agenda items. We have quite a few board action items. Board action is required and informational. Ms. Christine Kelly, would you mind going over the agenda items?
Good evening, everyone. Tonight we have 6 items on the agenda. The first item is a brief overview of the 2021 reopening of schools. This is an informational item. The second item is a 2021 adjusted district calendars. This will require board action. We will have to approve the 1 page as well as the professional development calendar. The third item is the Flexible Instructional Day, which will require board action. The fourth item are additional instructional online resources to prepare our teachers for an online environment, which will require board action. The fifth item is a proposal for planned instruction to our social studies curriculum, which will require board action. And the sixth item are our policies for this month. Both are informational this month. Mrs. Curry, would you like me to move on with agenda item number 1?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Kelly.
You're welcome. Item number 1, Dr. McGarry is virtual with us tonight, and he'll be introducing or talking to us about the reopening of schools. Dr. McGarry?
Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me loud and clearly. I just want to remind the public, when you do send in a comment or a question, it's important that you also add your address and your name, as well as the agenda item you'd like to comment on. So hopefully somebody on the chat will tell me if I'm not doing, it's not loud enough. But as we look to reopen our schools for the 2021 school year, I'm very proud of the school board of the Upper Darby School District and our administration, our teachers. We've worked very hard to try to give as much advance notice for the opening of our school year as we can. As we all know, recently, and I'm sure many of the parents and those attending live tonight, things continue to change. There seems to be much more growing concern about the reopening of our schools. I would like to make it clear from an administrative standpoint that I do not believe, and I want to slowly say this, I do not believe moving to an entirely all virtual model would benefit all of our students in the Upper Darby School District. I still believe that there's a significant technology divide in the country, not just in the Upper Darby School District. I'm concerned that a move to all virtual learning would put our students in a significant disadvantage. With that said, there continues to be growing momentum as other school districts make this decision to move virtually, which I respect, I understand why, and that is putting pressure on our school board and our administration to now also move to a virtual-only model. We will be reviewing this throughout this week. We will potentially be bringing this up under new business or old business, probably depending on how the board decides to bring it up at our next August board meeting, for a consideration of a change to our cohort model to a virtual-only model for the school year. If we do make a shift to a virtual-only model for all students, that shift would probably go at a minimum for the first semester of the year with a mid-return sometime in January. A shift to an all-virtual model to start the school year would also mean that we would not be shifting boundaries for the middle school students attending Drexel Hill Middle School. We would then consider shifting the boundaries in the middle of the year if we had to return for any kind of in-person instruction. I do want to be clear, however, that I do think that our model to start the school year, maximizing social distancing of 6 feet, asking our students to wear masks, we'd be enforcing that model as well in spaces such as the hallway, on our buses, transitioning from room to room. We believe that getting our students in person for some in-person instruction is vital not only to their mental health, but also making sure that we're staying in contact with our students during this very, very difficult time. We did learn that during the school closure that a move to the virtual model was very, very difficult on our students and on our families. We will be providing all students with a laptop. Each student, kindergarten through 12th grade, will have that device. A shift to an all-virtual model to start the school year will require us to make changes with our plan. I have received information from parents and from family members emailing us pretty regularly. We will work with families in a virtual model to try to help them gain access to resources such as inexpensive wireless internet or improved internet resources in their homes. And if we're able to provide hotspots, the district will certainly attempt to use CARES dollars, if possible, to provide hotspots to some families that are in need. At this time, however, we will continue to develop our cohort model, which is one of the items on this agenda for this evening. The reason we're still going to have students entered into a cohort is because if we shift from either in-person or virtual, we do not believe as an administration that we'll be able to return all at one time. And we think that by having this plan as a backup plan or the primary plan, we'll still be able to maximize social distancing if we return at some point in time. With that said, there is growing momentum again for a return for the 2020-2021 school year to return to in a virtual model. And I just wanted to open that up to the board as a conversation right now, just to get your feedback and thoughts. I know we have received many questions and concerns about this, but at this point in time, we are considering now a shift to an all-virtual half of the year for the Upper Darby School District, and we also would review that at the next August board meeting. So Board President Brown and Christine, I'm certainly open for questions.
I don't really have a question, Dr. McGarry. I just appreciate the work and the diligence that you put into the process, and I know it's an evolving and ever-changing process that you have to account for with the governor and other districts and things of that nature. So I just appreciate your attention to detail and trying to make the best decisions for our district.
Thank you. Don Fields, I see that you have a question.
Yeah, can you expand on, you don't think that's best for our kids, and I want to give you time to talk about that a little bit more, if you could.
Yeah, I think we have to be realistic that during the closure, one of the things that Governor Wolf and Pedro Rivera were able to waive was the required hours of instruction, as well as the number of days. As I read last month on July 14th, I made sure that I reviewed in our resolution that while flexible instruction has been approved and permitted, we are still obligated to meet the 900 and 990 hours, depending on elementary, middle school, or high school, and the 180 days of instruction. And the model that we were forced into on March 13th, I think we would all agree, was our best effort, but is not the best education we can provide our kids. So we definitely worked very hard to provide a virtual model. But school districts are still in a situation where it's not the teaching aspect of it that I'm concerned about. I'm confident that our teachers can make a shift. We put time and effort into it. We'll continue to grow and get better. I think we provide a better virtual model than charter schools do, especially with access to the extracurriculars we have as a school district. But it's access for our students. It's internet access at home. It's the fact that some parents that are still essential staff have to get up and go to work, whether it's in a hospital or a tech, and some kids are left by themselves, unfortunately. And even as a teenager, we all know this, it's difficult to get kids up and engaged. So our concern would be that we're obligated to make sure that students are attending. And during the closure from March 13th until the end of the school year, while we did see some positives of our students accessing it, overall, it's far from the attendance that we receive or we see when students are attending in person. So the cohort model, and I'll talk about that again a little bit. I just wanted to make sure we talked about this virtual piece, and then I'll come back to the cohort. The beauty of the cohort model is we were at least going to require students to touch in with us, that we would see them, we would put eyes on our students, and we make sure that they're doing okay. In the virtual model, we're putting a lot of pressure on our parents and on our communities. And I think it's unrealistic still to see that as an ideal learning model. At times, flexing in and out of a virtual model, there are some benefits at times to keep kids connected. But as a sole way, from a social and emotional standpoint, from a motivation standpoint, I don't see it as an ideal model. And I think in many school districts, not just ours, it is not ideal for our kids. Not ideal. And if the expectation will still be all the state testing and all the requirements that are out there, I think we're going to be hard-pressed to keep up with that. Nonetheless, if that's the growing momentum, and Don, I appreciate you asking the question, as more and more school districts make this decision to go virtual, we won't be able to staff an in-person session. So I was kind of hoping for more direction on a state level in some way, to be honest with you, that we would come together and try to create a model together. I understand how difficult that is, but as other school districts begin to close virtually, many of our teachers who live in those communities will not be able to make it to school to work for that model. So they're the reasons why I'm concerned, and that we will probably have to make an announcement sooner than later to move to an in-person, into a virtual model. Staffing alone will be an issue.
Thank you, Dan.
Dr. McGarry, this is Mr. Desnoyers. I have a question. It's my understanding that after the school board meeting earlier this month, when the board approved the cohort model, the district administered a survey that allowed parents to indicate if they preferred to have their child opt out of the cohort model and instead have their education completely virtual. Would you mind providing information as to the results of the survey, or can you provide results of the survey? Not in terms of specific numbers, but what I'm looking for is just a little bit of information as to, did a small amount of parents indicate they would like to have their child receive all virtual instruction, or a significant amount of parents indicate they prefer to have their child participate in all virtual instruction. That may influence the board's thinking on this matter.
So, as I know you know as a board member, because you guys are spending hours and hours, and I can't thank you enough as a board, the amount of time that it goes in being a volunteer, the hours that board members are on calls, informational sessions. I mean, the board is in an informational session on a weekly basis. So, Neil, let me start off by saying, and you know this, I'm sure, this is more polarized than just about anything that's come up in public education in a long time. So we have people who are furious with us that we're not returning completely for all in-person instruction, and we have those that are furious that, that we're not virtual completely, and then we have people that are there that are like, thank you for the hard work, which is always nice to hear. We'd like to hear more of those. But I will say that the data early on was definitely leaning more toward a spread of about a third of the people wanted to all in person, a third of the people wanted to come back in totally, a third wanted a hybrid, and then a third wanted virtual. The problem, Mr. Desnoyers, is that we're getting under 15% of our community responding to the multiple surveys that we put out. The most recent survey, however, that we did put out that we closed last Thursday, and I want to be clear with the public, the reason why we closed the survey last Thursday is the effort that it goes into shifting scheduling students, especially to secondary level, and then transportation costs. Because when we run the cohort model and we have to pick kids up in the morning and transition kids in the middle of the day, we have to make sure that we're not running buses unnecessarily and we're picking students up. So we had to put some kind of timeline on that. So, Mr. Desnoyers, as of Thursday, we were over 3,000 people, up from the original number of folks who responded to our first set of surveys, and there were multiple surveys, as you know. But as of last Thursday, it was up to over 3,000 individual students requesting virtual learning. And then as of today, we were getting emails from parents and families saying, look, we recognize that your survey was closed, but we're seeing what's going on across the country, and we don't feel comfortable. On one hand, we felt comfortable, but now we're feeling less comfortable. So more and more people are reaching out, and as you know also, it seems like on some level, younger students are now being impacted by COVID-19, whereas earlier on they may not have been. There seems to be growing concern and an increase for a request for virtual learning. And as a result of that along with other school districts making that announcement, we would be looking at potentially making that shift. And to answer your other point that you're making, when we approved the plan on July 14th, the plan provided flexibility, but the board voted on a start of the school year in a hybrid approach. So the board would, in my opinion, have to go out publicly and take action on a new plan, which would be to start the year in a virtual model, allowing us to flex into in-person instruction with the model that we've already worked on and creating. So basically, to answer your question in a quick, short response, the number of people asking virtual has increased, which is important. The number of staff members that I think will be impacted as their school districts look to go virtual will make it difficult for us to staff it. And to be also clear with everybody, we are not getting clear and direct guidance as much as we would like to as superintendents. I know Mr. Salerno was on a call for me today regarding this, but we're not getting clear and direct guidance. It's becoming more and more of a reality that school district superintendents and school boards are going to be on their own, pretty much, deciding how to handle a COVID-19 student or a COVID-19 teacher, and when do we close schools or when do we not close schools. And the turnaround time to make those decisions will become maybe potentially untenable, and then staffing will become even more of an issue. So for those three reasons, the uncertainty on the decision-making, that we're not getting as much clarity as we'd hoped to get, the other issue with staffing, and then seeing an increase with parents reaching out to us would be the reasons why we would look to make that shift.
Thank you very much for your very detailed and informative response. It does, at least it provides me more information, and I do see your point that the board approved the cohort model, and if a change needs to be made, that requires another board vote. But in closing, I would just like to thank the families who did complete the survey, giving the administration and the board essentially more information is very helpful.
And Mr. Desnoyers, I agree. We need to, more than ever, and somehow we've got to continue to reach out, even at the township on some level for some support, because a move to all virtual is going to be very significant to this community as far as feeding our kids and staying connected. We all have to rally around it, and I appreciate you. I agree, thanking those parents for completing the survey. We need to be fully engaged. Our community and our school district has to continue to work hand in glove the best that we can through this very difficult time, and we've got to stay connected. So when a survey goes out, send us your answers. Send us your best answer at that time. As a school district, we're going to have to be flexible and work with you, but getting more information at that time is very important as we make these decisions. So remember, we have over 12,000 students, 13,000 depending on if they're out of placement in the school district. So we getting under 15% back, we have to get more responses. And I appreciate that this last survey, we did get more responses than we did before. We still have to continue to get much, much more parent involvement and engagement as we make these decisions. So I agree. Thank you for those who were able to complete that.
Thank you, Dr. McGarry. This is Gina Curry. I just also want to thank all the parents that have been really involved in participating in the surveys. And you brought it up, Dr. McGarry, about the feeding if we do go virtually to virtual education for the first half of the year. I was just curious about that piece.
Yeah, and Ms. Curry, and maybe you can help me out too, because I'm struggling with some of the stuff that I'm reading. I don't know these announcements where they're short-term or long-term. See, part of my fear is, I'm worried about going virtually for a lot of reasons. Staffing, personnel, who are we going to keep on board? Who do we pay? Who do we not pay? When people are not working in an all-virtual model, taxpayers and the public are going to have an expectation that the all-virtual model is less expensive. So I would say that's a concern as well. I should have added that to Mr. Desnoyers and Don's question. But as far as how long, I would have to say that until further notice. Because if we're so afraid and fear of bringing anybody back, I don't see putting a date and a timeline to returning for in-person. If safety continues to be the issue, and staff are not comfortable and staff cannot return, I don't know that we can put a date to it. I say at a minimum, we should be out the first semester virtually if the board decides that, and we'll bring that up at the August board meeting. If that's the case, I would say at least until after winter break that we would be in a virtual model, and then we would if we were to return, barring some kind of a vaccine, I would say that we would be returning in that flexible cohort model, maximizing social distance. I'm just struggling with why a return in November or a return in January is any better than a return right now, other than we are seeing an uptick, and maybe by shutting things down, it would gain us some more time. I don't have a definite date. I would say that we would revisit it sometime in January after the semester break.
Okay, I appreciate that, Dr. McGarry. I think that, one of the thoughts in my mind as a parent of an elementary school child, it's just wondering, how soon we would have to make that decision and, really how we would have to navigate it once it was made, because I know by the announcement of another large school district next to us, I know people are definitely thinking about that tonight. Thank you. I had a question.
Thank you. This is Mrs. Mitchell. Dr. McGarry, some people might just be listening to this meeting for the first time tonight. There seems to be, unfortunately, a lot of talk on social media, and I am getting a lot of questions about the difference in the quality of the virtual instruction that we offered in the spring to what we're planning to offer now. And I know we've been talking, some educational lingo, and if you could just bring it down to what it's going to look like for a family that chose virtual. And also, I know that we've also been getting a lot of questions about people who missed the deadline. And could you just clarify who they're to contact if they missed the deadline and they want to change their decision?
Yeah, let me start with that one first, and then I'll work my way back to what it will look like. To the public that's viewing it there, as we continue to say, every one of our messages is a school district, and it's in our FAQ as well, so I can't help enough, but if you can go back to the FAQ and read what the FAQ has, and we'll keep updating it. As a parent and as a student, don't stress. It's stressful enough to be a parent in this environment, and as a kid, I can't imagine students that are worried about going to college or students that are, at home and they may speak English and some of their parents don't. Just continue to email us and reach out to us, and we're going to be here for you. Take a deep breath. It's going to be one day and 1 week at a time. So if you missed last Thursday's deadline, as we said in our health plan, we would have to have shifted in and out of the model anyway, depending on where we stood with a COVID-19 case or a teacher. So flexibility was always going to be the key. We needed that information for just an idea of what our cohorts might look like, what it might look like for attendance purposes. And so just to understand that it's going to be okay. If you missed last Thursday, it's going to be okay. At this point in time, Ms. Mitchell, we're going to shift this over to our schools. Our schools are going to design their cohorts, and you're going to hear a little bit about that later on. The cohorts will still be built. They're still going to be built if we have to flex in and out of a model. Where things will be different, and this hopefully will answer your question how it's going to look different, is in an all-virtual model, the students are going to be expected to log in to classes virtually. The school day will be the school day. While there was a lot of flexibility under the model from March until the end of the school year, we promised the public that we would be shifting. Our teachers have a contract, so the start and the end day will be the start and the end day in this reality. So we'll have an expectation that students at a minimum, will be logging in for virtual sessions for a half-day virtual, getting direct instruction, and then on their own getting some asynchronous work, doing some homework, looking at some videos, getting ready for the next day, because it's not healthy to have kids logged on a computer all day, for 7.5 hours a day getting direct instruction. But we will be giving students direct instruction in a synchronous model in the all-virtual model. Also in our flexible model, that was going to be an opportunity as well. So just understand it's going to look different because we're going to have an expectation that a high school student might have a first block class, and our expectation is they're going to have to log in virtually for their first block class at a specific time with their teacher. Because under the model that we're looking at, we will have to take attendance. We will have to account for our time and our student days. It'll be a much more strict model than the model that we were under from March 13th on. And I want to be clear, that puts pressure on our parents. And as a result of that, our guidance counselors and our social workers, I know Ms. Elgard and Dr. Puglisi, we will be making sure that our nurses, our social workers, and our guidance counselors are checking in with students if we were in a virtual model, making sure that we're connecting with those kids if they're not logging into their sessions. And that's one of my biggest concerns. Having you come to school, we can put eyes on you, we can see you, we can check in on you, we can get you different services and support that you might need. But it's going to look different, Ms. Mitchell, because there's an expectation, and we need our parents to help us. The students have to log into their classes. They will be required to log in to get their instruction. And that's where there will be a significant difference.
Thank you, Dr. McGarry. I also want to just point out, unless Mr. Warsavage wants to, that there is a lot of talk about what a cyber charter school can provide for the students. What they can't provide is the Upper Darby curriculum. If you were to shift between a cyber charter, let's say, and if we do come back in person, later on in the year or something, you aren't going to be up to speed with the Upper Darby curriculum. And we do have a very rigorous curriculum. We've implemented a lot of new curriculum lately that is very robust. And we want to keep our students with us, and we hope that our families will work with us and stay with us through this difficult time.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize this completely, Ms. Mitchell. Parents who shift out of Upper Darby School District and move away to cyber schools will significantly reduce the programs that we do offer that are amazing, and will then put the school board and the school district in a situation, and I'm always going to be honest and transparent in these conversations, staff, that will lead to furloughing of staff in this budget season. So we need to work together. We don't want to cut programs. We have a very robust set of programs here in the school district. We want to keep them. We want to navigate this difficult time. But you are correct that by staying with the Upper Darby School District in the flexible model and the virtual model, you are getting a lot of access and support from the Upper Darby family, the Upper Darby teachers, guidance counselors, supports, connectivity with clubs, connectivity with sports, connectivity with our music program, things that we deliver during the school day that some charter schools do not deliver. We deliver them during the school day. So the model that we're going to provide, we believe, is far, far better. And we don't want to see our families leave. Now, we will have some growing pains, and we're going to have to work through this, continue to work through this together. And we're going to be flexible with our families, but I'd hate to see people run from the Upper Darby School District at this point in time. It would have a very significant negative impact on the staffing of our schools and the future programs we offer, in particular at Upper Darby High School.
I just want to say, I think the unfortunate scenario, and Dr. McGarry, I think you spoke to this, the unfortunate scenario we are in is that schools across the state are now forced to put a plan together, or have been forced to put a plan together on their own with basically no state guidance. And the result being that we as individual school districts are inevitably competing with each other for resources. We would all be better served if the districts across the counties and the state had coordinated and worked together. Dr. McGarry, I know you were willing to make that effort. I just wish more districts had been willing to do so. As far as hybrid versus full virtual, although there would be on average only two in-person half days a week, I think for a number of families and students in this district, those 2 half days would be very helpful. Further, as far as cyber charter versus Upper Darby cyber, speaking from experience, I mean, if the thinking is, well, Upper Darby cyber is going to be a lot of work, so let me go to charter cyber. I mean, they're both a lot of work. You still have the same issues. You still have the same problems. But with Upper Darby, you have the curriculum, you have the resources, you have the commitment. the cyber charters are committed to a profit. Upper Darby cyber programs are committed to educating your kids. And that's all I have to say.
Yes, and I want to say that all the superintendents in Delaware County, it becomes very, very complicated and difficult. We all have to try to meet the needs of our communities. I agree with you, Don. I wish there would have been a much different effort on a much larger scale, even outside of the county, because we meet regularly, the superintendents in Delaware County, I think, to try to talk about the sacrifice that's needed to pull this off. I am also, just anybody who's listening right now, understand shifting schedules. The Upper Darby High School administration and Dr. Manfrey and James Finch and Kelly Simone, the amount of time that goes into scheduling a block schedule, I say this all the time, it's like scheduling the high school. For the average high school is not a block schedule twice. There's 3,800 kids in the high school, and it's a block schedule, so they're really getting 2 years in 1 year. And making sure, as Mrs. Simone and Mr. Finch and Dr. Manfrey try to give every kid what they want, we're trying to do that in a flexible model and a virtual model. So what we were doing at Upper Darby High School is still giving all the courses that we were trying to give. So every time we shift and we move out of one of these models, it becomes very difficult to staff and schedule that. It's really hard to keep changing a high school schedule and a middle school schedule. It becomes very, very, very difficult. And back to your comment about the days, one of the beauties of the cohort model we're working at is elementary school kindergarten students were going to be in still 80% of the time on an AM. They get an AM session now, they're going to get 80% of that time. And the elementary school students we're going to be coming in 1st through 5th grade more times as well. It does become more complicated at the secondary level, but what we were offering in the cohort models, when those students weren't coming in for in-person in their cohort, they were going to be able to log in virtually to attend a synchronous lesson on the days when they were not coming in for in-person sessions. So we were proud of that model. We're still proud of that model, and who knows, maybe depending on where we end up, that may at some point in time come into play. But right now, it looks like more and more that virtual becomes a push. And I would say it's becoming more of a push for staffing reasons.
Just personal commentary as an elected official that has to also rely on direction from state and federal government. It's very frustrating to get those mixed signals, especially from the federal level where we do want to gradually open everything up, everyone goes back to work. But then when you're shutting the schools down and creating an entirely virtual environment for whatever period of time, it defeats that purpose and brings us back to square one. So I really hope that all levels of government, especially state and federal, look at how local governments are getting the business of the people done and help empower us to provide more for the district population that we have to serve. And one other piece. I personally feel that our public school experience can pass the mustard against any kind of charter, cyber or otherwise, so I'm not too concerned with that, but I need to hit home the fact that when you do, we will never penalize or think otherwise of parents who make responsible choices for the educational experience of their children. But when you do take your children outside of the Upper Darby School District and get your education elsewhere, and you're still living here, that money goes away from us, and we're already underfunded. So that just creates more of an issue for us to have to address at a later point in time, and we can avoid all of that by really coming together, making whatever hybrid, virtual, whatever model work, because our kids are depending on it, our families are depending on it. We have to get it right. So that was all.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that, Damien and Ms. Curry, if I can, if that's okay.
Yes. Thank you.
That as we're in this model, everybody, and you'll see that it comes up in one of the other agenda items called the Flexible Instructional Days model that we're applying for, and that I'll review with Christine, Ms. Kelly as well tonight. Things that we want to put out to people. In a virtual model, there's a program called Safe to Say Something. So students that are in need have to reach out. The school district gets that anonymously, and we do an investigation with the police if necessary to make sure our kids are safe. So I can't emphasize enough that if we're in a virtual model, there are kids who need help still, and there are resources for those kids who need our help, and one of them is the Safe to Say anonymous reporting that we want to make sure that our kids are aware of. If they need our help, they can do that, or they can certainly send us an email and reach out to one of us, an administrator, a guidance counselor, We have those relationships with kids. Reach out to us if you need us. Don't get down on yourself. Even if it gets tough, we're going to be here to get you through it. That's number one. Number two, special education is a concern. And families that are in need of our help and their students that are in need of our help is a concern. How are we going to continue to make sure that we're giving those students their evaluations? And that will be something we're going to have to address moving forward. And the final thing, as board members and anybody who's listening to this call, we've got to put a lot of pressure on some of these state mandates and federal mandates. And I know you've heard this from me before, but I'm going to keep saying it. When there is uncertainty, the one certainty we've had is that our teachers have given a lot of effort, and so have our administrators and so has this board, to do the best we can to navigate all of this, to continue to push mandates, unfunded mandates, and to continue to push things like state testing on schools when we can't get 100% clarity on how to reopen schools, I think is absolutely ridiculous to consider that narrative. Until things become normal, whatever that looks like, I think we need to really wrap our head around what the focus is on. Getting our kids the best education and making sure they're socially and emotionally sound should be our emphasis. Sorry, Ms. Curry.
No problem. Thank you for that. Board Member Rachel Mitchell has another comment.
Thank you, Mrs. Curry. I just wanted to say that and acknowledge how unsettling this must be for our teachers who are trying to plan for the reopening. If we're hybrid, if we're teaching online, what that looks like, how we're going to do it in the classroom, how we're going to do it out of the classroom. And I just wanted to give a real shout out to our teachers who really tried very, very, very hard to provide the best possible education that we could on such short notice in the spring. And I know they're going to be amazing, however this looks for the fall. And hopefully we will have some more definitive answers very shortly, and everyone can settle into what that's going to look like so that they can do those amazing jobs, our families, our teachers, and our administrators. So just thank you to everyone for being flexible and during this difficult time.
Thank you, Mrs. Mitchell. Are there any other questions from board members concerning agenda item 1? So it looks like there's no more comments for agenda item number 1, and we'll move on to agenda item number 2, the adjusted district calendars for 2020-2021. Thank you, Ms. Kelly.
Thank you, Mrs. Curry. Like Dr. McGarry has pointed out, the state and the guidance from PDE is not waiving the 180 hours or 180 days or the hours for instruction. So Ms. Buford and I have worked hard on revising the calendar again, but we looked at it from August until January right now, and what we're proposing is are changes to the one-page calendar, as well as changes to the professional development calendar, which was approved last month. When we're talking about requiring board action at this meeting, we're talking about moving an item forward so that the board can formally vote on it at the August meeting, which would happen on August 11th. So these are our recommendations for the board as we begin to process through a calendar change once again. On the agenda tonight is we're going to look at the one-page calendar and some of the changes there, and then, of course, the district professional development calendar. So as we look at the one-page calendar, the first day of school will remain the same as August 31st, and this is where we would begin the flexible cohort model or the virtual model if parents opted for that model. This would be for all students in grades K through 12. These would exclude the early dismissals that once happened or once were on the calendar originally that was approved previously in February. So August 31st, September 1st, September 2nd, and September 3rd would become cohort days or a distance learning day for students in those learning environments. What we would also be doing is removing the elementary dismissals for elementary, middle school, and high school on Wednesdays, and Wednesdays would become a distance learning day if we move to that flexible cohort model type of schedule. The following weeks would have to be adjusted due to a holiday or a school closure, and they are listed above, and they are also on the one-page calendar that will be, is in board docs for everyone to see. It's too small to, of course, project it here, but this is a summary of it. So these are the weeks that would be adjusted. And again, we are looking at the first semester right now from August until January, with the idea in December we would come back with, if we have to, with a new calendar for the second half of the school year. There are no changes to the Labor Day weekend, so schools and offices would remain closed on September 4th through September 7th. Columbus Day would remain closed for students and staff, with the offices open. Election Day, there would still be no school for students. The Thanksgiving holiday, the winter break, and Dr. Martin Luther King Day would all remain closed as shown on our one-page calendar. So there are no changes to that part of the calendar. As I move forward to the professional development calendar adjustments, what we're looking at now from August until January are four full days of professional development for teachers. So that counts August 25th, 26th, 27th, and 28th. And it also gives us 13 distance learning days, or those Wednesdays that we would be capturing back, that we could provide professional development on those days. We would also be providing office hours for students. We could do conferences during those days for parents as well. And teachers would have some additional planning time that they could work on building their curriculum and making adjustments as we see needed as we're moving into a cohort model or a virtual model. So this amounts to 45.5 hours. This is an increase. If we took the first half of the school year, this is an increase in our professional development time that we've been talking about if we do move to this type of model. Again, our topics are not going to change. We're going to stick with our focuses, and we are going to make sure that we continue to look at building level needs and what principals have to provide professional development on. We have to also remember that there are mandatory professional development sessions that we have to continue because we have testing. We have keystone trainings that we still have to get through, PSSA trainings, compliance trainings. So those would always, they will remain there. But our curriculum focus days will remain on our district initiatives. We would focus on technology and then any new program implementations that we see that need professional development as well. So our needs are still going to be met, and we have additional time to do that, and we'll be using those Wednesdays as well as those first full 4 days to provide that professional development. So at this time, I'm going to ask, are there any questions on the one-page calendar or the professional development calendar?
I have a question, Ms. Kelly. This is Gina Curry. I know the schedule is pretty much staying the same, even if we go into a virtual model. But do you think there will be a need for change in professional development as a result of the virtual model? Like, do you think there will be any need for change regarding the professional development throughout the year if we stay in a virtual model?
So we did take that into account, and we built in curriculum days that the supervisors would be able to move things around if they had to. We also looked at what technology needs are right now and looked at, okay, what could happen in November or December. So we built in some flexibility in that we didn't use up every single minute of our time on district initiatives that are up here on the screen right now. But we did look at, okay, we may have to be flexible here as well. I think with everything that we're doing right now, flexibility is the key. And as we continue, I meet monthly with the teachers union through IAC, and I get a lot of feedback from them. We use our instructional coaches, so our plan is to use as many of those resources as possible to hear what the teachers need, and we will make adjustments as we feel fit, as we see are needed.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions from other board members on this particular agenda item? Okay, it looks like We don't have any questions from other board members. Was there anything additional that you needed to add? Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can. No, there's nothing additional. I can move on to item number 3 if we're ready.
Okay, yes, we're ready. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So item number 3 is the Flexible Instructional Day, or FID. This was a law that was passed last year, and it's called Act 64 of 2019. And this allows for offline or online instruction if the Board of School Directors approve it for up to 5 days as a result if there's bad weather or if there's a school emergency. As part of our plan this year, or part of looking forward, this application had to be completed, and Dr. McGarry, I know, is going to jump in here. But during this application process, which was very long and tiring, we had to provide a detailed plan as to what we would be doing in the event that we had to close schools because of bad weather or a school emergency. This grants us up to 5 days for this type of flexible instruction. And what we have to do, and the reason that we're bringing it forward right now, is it does need board approval. It needs a formal resolution, and all of this gets submitted to the state. In addition to submitting the resolution to the state and needing board approval, there was a tight timeline on when it needed to be approved. We also had to provide 6 lesson plans or sample lesson plans as to how or what instruction would look like in this type of model. At this point, the application has been completed, and we're moving it forward for board approval. It has been uploaded into board docs, and Dr. McGarry, I'm going to turn it over to you to add anything else that you need to.
Thank you again, Ms. Curry and Ms. Kelly. And I know, as a reminder, sometimes we go through these, and those who are new joining the meeting, that we do allow public comment at the end. So those who are chiming in and watching this, you can certainly send your emails to us at committeequestions@upwardrbsd.org or call in at 610-789-7200, extension 2000. If you could just leave your name, your address, and the agenda item you'd like to comment on, we will certainly read that as we conclude the back and forth with the board and the administration at the end of these meetings, at the end of this agenda item, each agenda item. So the question about the FID, those in the public, hopefully you'll start to hear some of the, the frustration we have as a school district. So we've had to fill out several templates. We've had to fill out an athletic template for returning in a healthy way, a reopening of schools health plan that we had to fill out. Then there was a emergency instructional template that we've had to turn in. And now what we have in front of the board and the public right now is called a Flexible Instructional Day application, which will give the school district 5 days of flexibility. Ironically, in this environment, you would think that, and while I know what's in the school code, there would be a consideration to make this so that flexibility is now just as a way of education, that we would have this flexibility. But this was really about emergency closings, such as a snow emergency closing or power outages, and how we could make up the school time in a flexible model and having approval to do so. So there are a series of questions, and the document is very, very awkward to work on that the state has created. But there are some significant questions I just want to review with the board, and then obviously take some feedback that are there. We're checking off that we would be providing FAPE, all the school code for flexible instruction, taking attendance, holding students accountable. We have to talk about how we're going to communicate this with families and with the parent. We talk about how we do communicate, what our resources are for the public and for the board to be aware of. We remind people that we've now moved into a phase of a red phase, a yellow phase, and a green phase that we'll be discussing in our schools. We talk about the platforms that if we are in a situation, much like reopening the school year potentially in a flexible model or in an all-virtual model, that we will be, or how we will arrange small group instruction, how we'll use our learning management platform, but in particular, that we're still going to be following our board policies, whether we're in person and virtual, whether there's flexible instruction or not. Things like child abuse, we'll still be following those things. Things like our Safe to Save program, things like accessing our guidance counselors and our social workers, all very important. We wanted to make it clear that there's an etiquette for virtual learning, and we ask that our parents and our teachers that are obviously joining us live make sure you review this at the beginning of your lessons with your students and at home with your own children. Students that are accessing this should be in a room where they can focus on the virtual instruction if that's the model that we're in at the time. Practicing on how to use their computer, their microphone, etiquette for communication, how we conduct ourselves in a virtual model using our videos. One of our biggest concerns, Ms. Curry, is that our teachers are concerned about how students are going to address them and handle this in a virtual setting. So we're going to make sure that our staff and our students are conducting themselves as if we were in person. It's very important that we continue to use appropriate communication and our behavior is appropriate in a virtual model and a flexible model as well. Some of the key components of this, we talk about what the flexible schedules will look like again in this application, what the elementary school, the middle school, and the high school schedules will look like. And then toward the very last few pages of the document, Mrs. Kelly talked about, we had to talk about how we have these exemplar lesson plans. But it's also important that we describe the procedure for tracking student participation. This is very important for the public. March 13th was an emergency. Now when we have to go into some kind of virtual or flexible model, we must follow District Policy 204 attendance. Students will be obligated to log into sessions, either asynchronous or synchronously, through our learning management system, Schoology. So we'll be following Policy 204, and we'll be contacting students and parents if they're not there. It's also important that we are following Policy 806, which is our child abuse and neglect. Anything that should occur in that area, we would be mandated reporters and following our policies, regardless of it being virtual or not. And then Safe to Say is obviously a program where we'd be enforcing that as well, that anytime our students need to access or get help, they can also file some anonymous reports through Safe to Say. Special education will be important. Social emotional learning will be important. So we have that considered in this model. And communicating with the state, as Ms. Kelly very well said, this will then go to the Department of Education if the board adopts it in August. And then we'll get the review. Any changes or any reviews that come back from the state will certainly bring the board up to speed. But the most this would give us is 5 days. 5 days of flexible instructional approval. That's why we passed the resolution that we passed last month to make sure that we do have even more approval to provide this flexible level of instruction. That's all that I have, Ms. Kelly.
Thank you, Dr. McGarry. Ms. Kelly, do you have anything further on this particular item?
I do not.
Okay, that particular item, just to remind board members, is going to require board action for the next meeting. The fourth agenda item, Instructional Online Resources.
So last month, I introduced a few online resources, and as we continue to talk to teachers and work with my team of district supervisors, we look to introduce and to adopt additional online resources to help with online instruction. Whether we're in a cohort model or in a virtual model, we do need instructional resources that help support the teacher's instruction. So what I'm proposing tonight are a few different resources. The first resources that I'm proposing for adoption is called Nearpod. And Nearpod is a platform that merges formative assessment and multimedia so that students can collaborate. And I am going to show you a few slides of what that would look like. I provided the board and the public many slides on what this would look like, as well as the fleshed out professional development plan. I'm not going to go over the 50 slides that have been provided, but they are there for everyone to see. What I'm looking at is a 36-month partnership with Nearpod. The appealing part of Nearpod for me and my team of supervisors and instructional coaches was that it integrates with Schoology. And anytime we can have platforms integrate, for anybody that knows technology, it's nicer when things work together and communicate. So that's always a thing that we are looking for, is what does Schoology and another platform, and how do they integrate and how do they speak to each other. I'm looking at this for students in grades 3 through 8, and the approximate cost, which I have up on the board, is $157,000. Since that cost, since I did this slide, we were able to talk to the vendor, and they were able to give us an additional discount. So the price tag is now at $147, which is a nice savings. They also were able to provide additional savings because of our size, of course. With this, the model is that I would be providing professional development, and our team would be providing professional development for teachers in August and September, so using some of those professional development days. And we would use a train-the-trainer model, although they have given us a lot of professional development through webinars and things like that. With this resource, as well as all the other resources that I described tonight or asked for approval for tonight, these are all being paid out of Act 30 funds. So there is no cost to the district for this software or any of the online textbooks that I'm going to talk about for the high school. Which is helpful in all of this as we're asking for permission. I'm going to jump down to what our students would experience if they use Nearpod. And another appealing piece of this is we can build our own school libraries through this. So our teacher wouldn't have to sift through the hundreds of thousands of lessons that come into Nearpod. Upper Darby can start to create their own library. So if I was a fourth grade teacher, a science teacher, and I wanted to teach the solar system, our coaches could start to build that library for our teachers. And then our students, what they would see on the other end of this, through using Google Slides and using Schoology, are how to collaborate, how to put in slides, and exploring. Okay, we're going to take a field trip to Mars. What does it look like? And then they are taken on this journey through the solar system. So it's very interactive. You have to think about similarities and differences, things that are tying into what we're teaching also in ELA. So we're making connections between content areas as well. Again, they can edit slides, they can do add-ons, and they take these virtual field trips. Now, this is just one example. They're not all field trips. I'm just providing one example of what we could see. There are other things that students can do. They can also take some formative assessments so we can get a pulse on what is going on in the classroom or online, so we have an idea if there's any questions from the students. As you can see, there's mini quizzes after they have, after they've gone through their experience. And then there's also simulations that they can participate in so they can get an idea of what's going on. So again, this is just one example of what Nearpod could do. They have content in all of the core subject areas. They also have add-on packages, which right now I'm not looking to purchase additional add-on packages, except for the one for historical and literature pieces, because I do think that that's a good connection, as well as some of the vocabulary add-ons. But right now, what they have in here are thousands of lessons that the teachers and the students can interact and use on an online platform. The next piece are some secondary resources. Again, what I'm looking for approval on are online textbooks for college algebra, calculus, and statistics to help the math department with some of their needs. There are about 50 copies for each. As you can see, some of the price tags get a little bit higher when we're talking about higher level math courses, because some of them are that bridge that college level, and the textbooks do get more expensive. So these are online textbooks for our high school students in the math department for a 1-year license. And then the last one is a tech ed license for energy, power, and transportation. This is a 6-year license at $5,900. Again, there is no cost to the school district, so all the total cost of the online textbooks that I showed you tonight was about $15,000, and the Nearpod cost was about $147,000. But again, no cost to the district. The cost would be covered by Act 30 for these purchases. Mrs. Curry, are there any questions from the team?
Yes, I have a question, and I just have a comment really briefly, and I would like to thank you, Ms. Kelly, for sharing with us and the public about the cost savings that goes into this particular research for the materials that you are getting for the district, and I really do appreciate that, as I know the board does as well. The question that I had was concerning, this is for the 2021 school year, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so my only question is, when will the professional development take place for this? And do we think that the teachers and staff will be able to have ample time to be able to utilize this coming up for this school year?
Yeah, so the Nearpod presentation is for a 3-year license subscription. So we will have it past just the 2021 school year, but it will be implemented as soon as the board would take action or vote on it in August. I have already taken into account that we do need some trainings in technology, and I already was hoping that I could use some of the August days as well as the curriculum time that we have built into the professional development calendar to train teachers on this. Like we did last year with some of the office hours for our teachers, we were able to have our instructional coaches have office hours of their own, like a student would have office hours with their teachers, and to learn the platform. What we have found, Mrs. Curry, is that short little increments of PD ongoing is much better than giving everything at one time. So introducing a small piece of Nearpod followed by the teachers trying it and coming back with questions has been a saving grace in all of the technology push right now. So we would frame this and roll out Nearpod the same way. And the company's webinars allow us to do that also. We also have some contract and service time that teachers are able to use to better themselves as well. And many have expressed interest in using this platform.
That sounds good. I think I like the short increment piece as well for the staff and for the professional development. I do believe that board member David Neal has a question.
Thank you, Director Carey. Ms. Kelly, the licenses for the college textbooks, I believe you said there were 50. Are they recyclable, meaning that once they're finished being used for the fall semester, we can reuse 50 licenses for the spring?
Yes, that is correct. So since we're on the semester schedule, those licenses are for the full school year, and the access codes would be issued first to the first semester students and then reissued for the second semester students. Okay,
thank you. And I'm glad you got them to talk the price down to $147, because when I saw $157, it was a lot of money. Then when you mentioned it was coming out of, you said it was Act 34 money?
Act 30 money.
Act 30 money, okay.
Yes.
And
it has an acronym, Mr. Neal, it has an acronym. It's just, I'm drawing a blank to what it is right now. PCCD? Yay, I remembered.
There you go. So many. The funding comes through so many different sources. Now, I wanted you to talk about why is it grades 3 to 8? Why did we not include, K to 2 or 9 through 12? Why were those excluded from this resource?
So that's a very good question. So K through 2, we have many resources already. As you know, we have implemented into reading for our youngest students, and our concentration there is on reading and math, and we want to really focus on the early literacy skills for our students in kindergarten and first grade. As we looked at this product, and it is made for K through 12, but as we looked at this product, we didn't think that it did as much as we thought it would do for a third grader through eighth grader because of all the other resources we have for K1 and 2. What we really want students to do in those grades are interact with their teacher, interact with literature, text, and we thought that it would be better if we could use the resources that we had at that level and just concentrate on 3 through 8 for this. At the high school level, we implement, or we have other online resources that we felt like there was a lot of overlap with what Nearpod was able to do for us. So as as the supervisors and I did not look at this alone. Of course, my whole team looked at this as well. We looked at all the other resources that we have at the high school level and thought there was a lot of overlap and there was no need to implement it as an entire district. Now, in talking to my sales rep there, if that needs to change, if in year 2 we feel, it is more beneficial to have maybe the 9th through 12th graders using it, or just the 9th grade, we can add additional subscriptions to this, of course, without a problem. And like I said before, there are many add-ons for Nearpod, and we are just scratching the surface with what we are proposing tonight.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. And will you or another person be collecting data on whether or not teachers are using this resource and whether it's been implemented effectively inside our classrooms?
Yes, so through Nearpod, we can also get a usage report. So as teachers start to use it, as we start to train teachers on it, we can start to look at what parts they are using, and then we can also move around those add-ons that I keep talking about. If they're not using the things that we thought that they would use and we want to move to something else, there's a lot of flexibility here, and our sales rep has been more than helpful in telling us that we can make those adjustments as we see fit, especially in year 1. There are some local districts that do use this product, which I have been connecting with their curriculum supervisors as well to see how they rolled it out, and what products or add-ons they are using, so that we know what were the best ones to use up front in our initial implementation. But there are usage reports to answer your question, I'm sorry. There are usage reports that will give us that information, so we can track that data.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know this is somewhat new, so I'm still trying to figure out this resource as well and how to best implement it. So I appreciate your explanations. It's very helpful.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Board Member Neal. Are there any other questions from the board on this particular agenda item? It looks like there are no more questions, and just to remind the public that we will be reviewing comments. If people still want to make comments, we will be reviewing them at the end of the committee meeting. The next agenda item is the proposal for planned instruction, the addition of Juneteenth in the social studies curriculum, and this is board action will be required. I know Mrs. Kenya will be presenting. I was wondering if Ms. Kelly had a comment for the beginning, and if you don't, that's fine. I wasn't sure.
No, I absolutely do. Thank you. So I want to talk about why we are bringing this forward, this proposal for planned instruction. Anytime we make adjustments to our curriculum maps and start to look at our standards and making shifts to our standards, then we do have an AR that we follow to make those changes. And tonight, as we're bringing this item forward and this revision, this is just the initial phase on what we feel needs to be done in social studies. And Ms. Kenya is on the line, and she will be speaking in a few minutes. But she has been, this is her second year in, or going into her third year as supervisor, and she has been looking at the entire K through 12, or not K, 1st through 12th grade curriculum, and looking at where revisions need to take place so that students are getting an opportunity to see many different cultures, many different parts of history, as well as make connections between content areas. So at the start of this school year, when Mrs. Ortley retired, I proposed to John and his office, Dr. Council, and his office of making the shift from a reading supervisor at the elementary level who would be able to make connections between social studies, reading, literature, and all of those pieces, and Ms. Kenya focusing on the secondary level and humanities so that students are able to make connections between literature and history and those pieces as well. So what Ms. Kenya is able to do now is look at, okay, what is happening in the literature classes and how does that support social studies, and what changes have to be made to curriculum because of these connections that we see, and what opportunities should our students be seeing in all of this. So again, this is just our initial phase, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Kenya at this time, but we are looking at what resources are needed in all of this. So before I take too much of Kathy's presentation, I'm going to turn it over to her, and then I'll chime back in if I have to.
Good evening, Board President Brown, board members, Dr. McGarry, and the Upper Darby community. At the request of one of our students and with the board's approval, I've been tasked with incorporating Juneteenth lessons into our social studies curriculum. Based on the scope and sequence of our program, this presentation is my proposal as to the placement of those lessons. Next slide, please. Because I know some people are just listening, I'm going to read this statement slide. Unfortunately, there's a vast amount of pertinent history left out of our nation's history textbooks. In an attempt to better position our teachers to help our students to gain a broader sense of their shared history, we at Upper Darby School District are committed to improving our curriculum to acknowledge the political and cultural contributions of all Americans. Our social studies teachers here at Upper Darby work diligently to tell all sides of the historical record without bias or influence, so that students develop the skills necessary to properly analyze the interactions of cultural, economic, geographic, political, religious, and social groups. Nevertheless, we are not infallible. We acknowledge the need for increased cultural competence, and we welcome input from our community, our Deep Equity Committee, and our school board as we move forward. Next slide, please. I've included a sample of what a learning target for this chapter may include. In Chapter 5 in in Chapter 8 in 5th grade, the chapter is called Facing Slavery. I would like to emphasize that this is not set in stone. This is just me thinking what direction we might go in. The chapter itself contains the enslavement of West Africans, triangle trade, and the life for the enslaved on colonial plantations, including how they made their lives more bearable. The Juneteenth lesson would be an extension of the chapter that will include Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation and the ensuing delayed results for the slaves in Galveston, Texas. Next slide, please. With all the grades I present tonight, I've given you a sample of what instruction may look like. This instruction will be subject to teacher and equity team input. So this is kind of like where I saw it going over the Emancipation Proclamation, the 13th Amendment, explaining the implications of slavery, talking about the story of Juneteenth, analyzing the significance of the flag, and then the end result, constructing something about Juneteenth to share. Next slide, please. For 8th grade, in Chapter 16, Turning Points of the War, again, I show proposed learning targets. As I thought about this lesson, I thought about what students know now about bias, I mean in 8th grade, about bias and social racial injustice. I envision that they would analyze the effects of slavery as it stands in 2020 and advise President Lincoln as to if or how he should proclaim the emancipation for those enslaved in the South. In short, giving those students an opportunity to influence history. Next slide, please. Again, this is a sample of instruction that would align with the proposed learning target. Analyzing, evaluating the effects, comparing, contrasting Juneteenth with the July 4th celebration, synthesizing all that knowledge about barriers to freedom, and then an opportunity to write a letter to President Lincoln advising him on whether or how to deliver the emancipation. Next slide, please. In 11th grade, in government and law, there's I wrote Chapter 5, but it's actually Unit 5, my mistake. Again, I propose a learning target. In the context of Juneteenth celebrations, I wanted the students to analyze their present knowledge about the Constitution, equal rights, and justice for all against what they know personally about injustice and the need for change. In 11th grade, they should be able to articulate that into a plan for their community in which they have the power to advocate for their beliefs. Next slide, please. Again, this would be the proposed instruction, discuss the origins of Juneteenth, analyze the concept of civil rights, describe standards about courts, discriminatory law, and identify 3 questions for recognizing a civil rights problem. And then I really would like them to construct a community-based action advocating for social justice. Next slide, please. Professional development is a huge part of this. In my opinion, creating a culture of professional inquiry, that is building a professional culture in our district where teachers self-assess, reflect on their practice, and continue to learn, is just as important as what content we teach our students. This is a proposed PD session for August that will include a meaningful video and honest and courageous discussion about where we need to adjust our curriculum and practices as teachers to collaboratively work on rigorous, relevant lesson plans for our students. Next question, please. Next slide, please. And now I'm open for questions.
So, Ms. Kenya, before we open up to questions, I just wanted to draw some attention to why we are bringing this forward at this time. We have heard from the community as well as teachers, teachers and students as well, the need to make some changes to our curriculum. A few years ago, we heard from parents about personal finance. Why are we no longer teaching this? Why isn't it back in our curriculum? So similar to this, we are listening to what people are saying to us and want to make these changes to our curriculum. And Ms. Kenya has the vision here as well as the passion to make these changes and work with the equity team that Dr. Council's office has been working with to really bring this forward for our students.
I just wanted to thank Ms. Kenya for the great presentation. And I also wanted to just share that this particular presentation is definitely something that I know many of the board members have been looking forward to, and members of the community that have voiced their opinions about change in curriculum. So I do appreciate the administration for moving forward on this. This is very important. And I know that the Deep Equity team, the comprehensive team for the district, is currently partnering on this and will be looking at this curriculum through an equity lens. And that's very important as this particular type of curriculum moves forward in our district. Questions or comments from other board members? Okay, thank you very much. And the last, I believe this is the last agenda item for the evening. We are going to be hearing from Mr. Lambert on the policies. I'm sorry, I'm moving down to it. Policy 206, which is informational. And board member Des Noyers, was there something about the agenda 6?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Curry. Just real quick, I wanted to mention what is the agenda item titled Title IX Amendments. I will speak very briefly about that and then let Mr. Lambert talk about Policy 206. Before I get into either, though, I would like to just make the comment that the 2 policy items on the agenda tonight are listed as informational. This is out of the ordinary. Usually, what happens at committee meetings is policies with revisions are presented to the board and to the public at the committee meeting, and the board at the conclusion of the committee meeting gives approval to move the policy revisions forward to a vote at the next board meeting. Tonight, there are no actual policies with changes being considered by the board. For the Title IX amendments, Title IX is a law. The law has changed, but we do not yet have specific policy changes to consider. Those policy changes will be considered at the August 11th board meeting and will be made available prior to that to the public. And since policy changes related to the Title IX amendments must be in place by August 14th, the board will be waiving the usual first reading and the vote to change policies due to Title IX amendments that is taken at the August 11th board meeting will approve those changes. For the Policy 206 item that Mr. Lambert is going to discuss, Policy 206 itself is not changing. Policy 206 is titled Assignment Within District. What is changing is the specific school assignments for some of the addresses, some of the street addresses in the district. And those are captured currently in the attachment to Policy 206. But I will repeat that Policy 206 itself is not changing. So now let me move on to explain briefly what's happening with the Title IX amendments. I put a lengthy document. I posted a lengthy document to Board Docs on this agenda item with an explanation of what is happening. Title IX is a law that prohibits discrimination based on sex in educational programs and activities. On May 6th of this year, the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Education released amendments to the Title IX law that make extensive changes to the law. Some of those extensive changes include implementing lengthy requirements around training for school district employees, school district contractors, school district volunteers. Both what has to be covered in terms of training is dictated, and the fact that the actual training materials have to be posted to the school district website. That requirement is also in there. The process by which complaints of discrimination based on sex are investigated, decided on, and appealed is changing, and there are extensive requirements that must be laid out in the district's policies and procedures. And there are also some definitions and terms used that either are new or have definitions that are changed. So the goal of these extensive changes is to make the process by which complaints of discrimination based on sex, to make the investigation, decisions, and appeal process of these complaints completely impartial and unbiased. So with that said, I'll repeat that there's more extensive information about the Title IX amendments posted to board docs, and that there will be, there are policies that are impacted by this change in the law. Those policies and their changes will be reviewed and voted on at the August 11th board meeting, and unlike the usual process, those policy changes will take place immediately because the U.S. Department of Education has decreed that actual policies must change by August 14th.
Yeah, Tim, I think Mr. Desnoyers kicked it off a little bit, but on July 14th, when the board adopted a plan to reopen schools in a cohort methodology, we explained publicly several times that would require flexibility in our cohorts. And I just want to be clear before Tim goes through this. We have a policy 206 that is assignment within district. There are ARs that list street addresses and where you live, and those are called boundaries or catchment areas, and they determine where a student goes to school. Those will be remaining, but we are temporarily, as Tim, you'll go through here, reassigning cohorts so we can maximize social distancing and make sure that we're providing equitable educational opportunities to all the students in the school district under the cohort methodology. I want to pause on that, and then I want to say, if we are to start the year fully virtual, this presentation will not go into full effect until we would come out of the full virtual model. However, we would be on the back end making sure that we are building cohorts so that we're ready. If we have to shift into cohorts, we will be able to do so. One of the major shifts is that of over 400 students will be moving from Beverly Hills to Drexel Hill Middle School. Simply put, the space allows us to do that better at Drexel Hill Middle School in a socially distanced model. If we were to return for full in-person, Drexel Hill Middle School can't fit an additional 400 students in person. So if you think about that, by going live for all virtual instruction, those Beverly Hills students will be better served back at their home school because the class size will be better for them in that environment if we were to go fully virtual. So this presentation is just bringing people up to speed on cohort assignments in a flexible model. And the reason why we can't provide parents either an AM or a PM and keep, getting back to people, we get a lot of questions coming in. Well, can I have this session? Can I have that session? I want my friend, my son or daughter to go to school with a friend. We cannot meet those accommodations because we're trying to maximize the social distancing in the cohorts that we've created, transportation needs, as well as other curricular needs that we have. So these cohorts are the best we can do as a school district. Tim, go right ahead.
Thank you, Dr. McGarry. I know over the last couple months we've talked heavily about cohorts, and one of the main goals of today's presentation is to kind of give you a background of how those cohorts were developed and what our methodology was. Eventually, I'll go through each of these items in more detail, but kind of the timeline of how we looked at this is when the COVID pandemic came upon us back in May. You'll remember Mr. Lee presented to the board a number of scenarios of how it could look if we had a socially distance on buses and if we had a socially distance in the buildings. And he had some kind of metadata that showed that it would be very difficult for us to accommodate all school students in a safe manner. But what Dr. McGarry asked is, let's look at a more granular level. Let's look at how we can create models and scenarios, changing our boundaries, changing, what kind of square footage we need for teachers, square footage we need for students, and let's see how we can best serve the students to bring them into classes for in-person instruction, as well as keep them safe. So that really became the catalyst for building these cohorts. Then from that, we talked about the building of the cohorts. Then besides just boundary changes, there could also be the potential for grade changes. Where there's space, we want to optimize that space, and I'll go into the specific reasons for that. Then we look at, not one cohort is going to work for every school. Kindergarten's different than elementary, which is obviously different than middle and high school. We have a large population at our middle school, and there was not much of a chance to, just having that, the student population the schools would not be able to accommodate that. So we had to build it in such a way that we could address all the different needs throughout the district. Then we also had to look at it geographically. Transportation-wise, we can't be traveling all over the place, so we wanted to make sure our students stayed in a relatively, in their cohorts, would stay in an geographic area that was close to each other. So both transportation as well as family support and neighbors. Then we continued to update that with the principals, which eventually went to the board vote. And then once the board voted on it, we had official processes we had to provide after that. One of those being what we're presenting today, and also presenting options or availability for the public to look up information. So we're not just always, you're not just waiting for us. We want to have some interactive tools that would allow them to utilize and look up for themselves where they would go. So the tool we built an online tool that had a number of variables. How many times would the students go each day, how many days a week they would go, as well as what percentage of the room is made up of furniture, desks, shelves, whatnot, walking past, what amount of square footage would a teacher need, and then the square footage for student. And I know that square footage for student is really one of the key items there, because the number has it's been pretty steady at the state level at 6, and then there's been other changes that they've talked about, anywhere going down to 3 for some of the local health departments. But obviously the 6 has been the goal throughout this entire process, to keep the kids as safe as possible. We wanted to make sure that we're utilizing existing teaching staff and our current building spaces. We actually went down to each individual space and looked at how many students can fit into that space. And we didn't just say, okay, well, your large space, we can fit 30 kids in here. Even if 30 kids could fit, being socially distant, we actually we put a maximum number of seats, saying, okay, we're not going to have more than 14 kids in this classroom. And then from that, we were able to determine the best scenario that would work for the Upper Darby School District. Ultimately, what we ended up doing was for Aronimink and Garriford to increase their grades to include kindergarten, meaning the students that live in their current catchment would attend the kindergarten at that school and not the kindergarten center. Because one of the main thrusts that we want to also do is not shorten kindergarten. So kindergarten by default right now has half day, so we want to keep that as much as possible. But the kindergarten center itself would not be able to accommodate that, so therefore we had to find available space at other locations. Aronimink and Garriford were able to have the space availability to include kindergarten, and we also had Stonehurst Hills, where some of Stonehurst Hills will be able to go, and then half of Stonehurst will actually continue to go to the kindergarten center. It actually fit rather nicely and balanced out nicely within our scenarios. At the middle school, Dr. McGarry mentioned earlier that we would have Drexel Hills classrooms are larger than Beverly Hills, and moving the middle school population from Highland Park over to, over from Beverly Hills to Drexel Hill was we're able to balance those students as well for the space availability, not based on the number of students, but based on what space and the size of those spaces. Let me just make sure. So ultimately, we ended up with what was voted on, which was for kindergarten and elementary school, 2 in-person cohorts per day, an AM and PM, with transportation provided as the transportation rules. For middle school, they also did an AM and PM, but they went to 4 cohorts based on the number of students. That's how many cohorts they needed to accommodate all those students. And this has been broadcast in documents in YouTube. I listed the links. I'm not going to go into great detail because it's been stated, but I wanted to at least show you that this is where we are continuing to look at our cohorts. And then at the high school, similar to the middle school, they're using the AM and PM, but they're using a 3 cohort system. So cohorts, this is just a quick little synopsis of, we used what we call NPUs, neighborhood planning units, and we actually base them off census blocks or census information. So we can actually marry that information up across the district in case we ever needed to look at different demographics or financial information that the federal government includes. And then we have what we call NPU groups, which allows us we kind of merge a number of NPUs together into a logical group that we can then move around for planning purposes. It becomes, so we just like let's move this puzzle piece from one school to another, and with that puzzle piece comes an amount of certain metadata, number of students, and it automatically allows us to adjust and plan quite easily what would happen. It's kind of a lot of what-if scenarios. Once the cohorts were created, we then started doing a validation, where we said, okay, not all cohorts are not all NPUs or areas are going to have exactly the number of first graders on one side of the street as there are on the other side of the street. So we had to start building and mixing and matching to ensure that we had an equal number of students going to the different cohorts. Because let's just say you take Aronimink, you can't have 40 kids going to first grade in the AM and 20 kids going to first grade in the PM. You needed to balance that to ensure that the teachers who were teaching in the AM would have the same number of kids, so you wouldn't have a disparity there between both the grades and the spaces needed for those grades. Once the board approved the cohorts, we then moved into a more official utilization of these cohorts and start planning out how this is going to not only be used in our systems, but communicated. So transportation, you'll remember from a previous board meeting, is starting a new routing system. So we had to build all kinds of put all these shapefiles. Shapefiles is what they call, it's a geographic information system. It's like putting something on a Google map, if you think of it that way. That's a shapefile. So we had to give them our new catchments, the cohorts, walk zones, so they can use that to power their software and ensure that the students are being transported that need transportation. We also included maps in cohorts for the board docs policy 206, which were added into the ARs. And then we created, and this is what I'll get into the final slide, is we created Google Maps, which will allow the public to log in and put in an address and then see what school they would go to. And then the last thing I wrote here is we also tried to make it as easy as possible for our registrars and secretaries to be able to know what school and cohort a student would be assigned to when they register. So we created another online document which allows them to quickly look up a street and for every range know exactly what school that kid would go to, that student would go to, if it was kindergarten, elementary, middle, or high, and what cohort they would fall within. And that was very well received by the registration team, since I don't believe they didn't have something similar in the past. And this is something that we'll continue to update year after year. So to give you an example, I'm going to go into one of our maps here, and you'll have to forgive me, I'm not used to using a Mac, but it's the same as you would do with a normal Google map, where you can zoom in, zoom out, you can change the background. You can see down here I can change it to like a satellite view. But what it allows you to do is it has these layers on the left. So anywhere you go down here, you can turn on and off layers. So right now I'm looking at the elementary school catchments. But let's say I have a kindergarten student. I want to look at the kindergarten catchments. And you can, zoom into your house, or you can use the search tool and put in an address, and it'll automatically zoom to your account, same as if you're putting in an address using Google Maps as it normally is. If you want to see the schools, you just click on that, and then anytime you click on the school, you'd see the Google information that is associated with that school. So this kind of gives you an overview, and this represents the new catchment. So if you see over here in the Stonehurst area, where you have, I'm looking at kindergarten right now, and you can see how half of kindergarten is going to the kindergarten center and the other half would go to Stonehurst. If I overlay it, it'll get probably a little messy when I look at elementary schools. But you can see the green is Stonehurst, and then underlying that you can see where the boundary is between the kindergarten students that would go to the kindergarten center and the students that would walk to Stonehurst Elementary. And you can see where the schools are here. So this kind of gives you a nice overview of the different catchments. If we went back here and then we looked at the actual cohorts, it's a very similar map, but in this respect it's looking at cohorts. So if I was to look at Aronimic's cohorts, I can turn off, you can see it'll say here on the left, cohort 1 and cohort 2, and it has the still same capabilities where you can search for a address, it'll pop it up on here, and you can see exactly what cohort you would belong to. And this is represented in all our other documentation, the same information that was sent to the transportation, same information that the registrars have access to. So it allows anyone to, any of our families who are moving to the area or live in the area, that they can look up where they would be. And it's fully available to the public. Elementary schools, we had to break them into two maps just because of the limitations of what we can do. It only allows 10 layers, but same thing. We can zoom into any elementary school. If I'm over here, Stonehurst Hills, you can see. So is there, I think that was everything.
Thank you, Tim. This is Gina Curry. I believe Dr. Manfrey has a comment.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Curry. First of all, I think the board recognizes this fact, but I want to compliment Mr. Lambert. The fact that Upper Darby School District has Tim Lambert working for us is just an unbelievable asset in many ways, especially under the current circumstances. But I do want to point out, and I believe that Dr. McGarry may have done this already, but I do think it's really important, that while in the flexible cohort model, Beverly Hill, Highland Park students who attend Beverly Hills Middle School will be going to Drexel Hill Middle School in the flexible learning model, as Tim pointed out. If, for whatever reason, Upper Darby School District ends up in the full virtual model, the Highland Park students would then be shifted back to Beverly Hills Middle School. And I want to remind everybody why we made this shift in the first place. We made the shift in the first place because of the square footage of the classrooms at Drexel Hill Middle School, which enabled us to have more students than the square footage of the classrooms at Beverly Hills Middle School, which in turn would increase the number of students in each section. So in other words, even though there's only 9 to 11 kids perhaps in a classroom at a time in the face-to-face model under the cohort model, the sections for that teacher at Drexel Hill Middle School could have been anywhere from 35 to 40. If we go to the virtual model, clearly there's no longer a reason to shift those 450 Highland Park students who live in the Highland Park area, catchment area, I should say. There's no longer a reason to shift those 450 Highland Park students to Drexel Hill. And then that would then again enable Beverly Hills Middle School to have the live synchronous virtual instruction with a similar number of students in a class that we would have at Drexel Hill Middle School. So I just wanted to point that out. And I also wanted to thank Mr. Lambert. His level of preparation and his ability to put this kind of thing together is just, I'm in awe of it. And I thank him and thank the board for having him here in Upper Darby School District.
Just following up, Tim, great job as always. And the interactive maps are really a benefit, I think, to not only our school district teams in our efforts in planning, but also to our families. And just to reiterate once again that if you look on the elementary maps that Mr. Lambert has created, the overlay in blue represent the families that would be a part of Cohort 1 in the flexible scheduling option, and Cohort 1 is the AM cohort, and Cohort 2 would be the yellow overlay, and you can drill down to the street level. In addition to that, and this should give you more than enough information in order to determine the cohort that your family will be in for the elementary schools, but we are also going to be sending before the end of the week communication explicitly to each of the families in the morning cohort and PM cohort, just making sure they understand that what that means and which cohort they are a part of if we are to start the school year during in a flexible scheduling option.
I also wanted to mention that in the flexible cohort model, flexible scheduling model, 8 Beverly Hills Middle School teachers would be shifting, essentially transferred to Drexel Hill Middle School to help cover the additional 450 some odd students who live in the Highland Park catchment area. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Manfrey. That's good information to know. Thank you, Mr. Lambert. That was great information. And if there are no other comments at this time, I believe it's time for public comment. Ms. Buford, are there public comments? I'm sure there are.
Our first public comment is from Nicole Carroll at 2342 Bond Avenue in Drexel Hill, received on the 27th at 11:03 a.m. via email, addressing agenda item 3.1. Comment begins, good morning, I'm looking to get some clarity on the elementary school reopening for Hillcrest. I have one child going into third and another going into second. When will we find out if they are AM or PM, and about this tutoring? Is it offered to all children to have them in school for the whole day, or what else does that look like? As a single parent, I'm trying to plan ahead and make sure I have care covered for my kids that cannot stay home alone with me having to work full time. End of comment. This comment was handled by Principal Danny McEady of Hillcrest. He was able to respond to that parent. Mr. McEady was not able to respond to that question regarding the tutoring. Would someone like to answer that question at this time? Dr. McGarry, Frank Salerno.
Yeah, I'll jump in and Frank can answer it. At this point in time, based on our work with Mr. Lambert and Marvin Lee and Frank Salerno, if we were to open in a hybrid flexible model, we feel very confident that we could get close to 80% of all first through third graders who were to attend in person. If they chose the flexible in-person model, we were going to be able to provide tutoring services. So if a student was a PM student, they could have come and received AM tutoring. And if they were an AM student, they could have received PM tutoring after their AM session. I've asked Mr. Salerno to continue to move forward with interviewing and bringing people on board. We're looking to bring on about 60 hourly employees, I believe, and Frank can jump in. But we felt that we could help support our first through third graders. We were going to attempt to run our Kinder Cares program through our own recreation that we offer Kinder Cares. We were going to continue to run that normally anyway. But we've been working on a game plan to provide first through third graders, and we felt that we could cover 80%. Some of that would mean, however, to be clear with parents, that students who are attending Hillcrest, let's say, may have to walk down to Drexel Hill Middle School because there's space available for us to be able to have the tutoring program. We're not calling it daycare because we're going to have students with their computers try to do their asynchronous work or catch up on their homework, so parents don't have to worry about that when they get them home first through third grade. Now, if more students are selecting the virtual option, we may be able to open that up to fourth and fifth graders, but right now our focus is on first through third grade. And I want to emphasize this to the public right now. We have not made a plan yet to say that we're opening virtual only. The beginning of tonight's meeting was simply to say to the public and the board, we know that that is gaining momentum, and at this time we are still approved to open in a flexible cohort model, and we're still planning to do so, so we're still making sure that we're looking into how to provide daycare and getting our students computers. Frank, anything you want to add to the daycare comment?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. McGarry. Yes, through Tim Lambert's work, and the work of the elementary principals and secondary principals, we were able to determine our capacity using our space at the elementary schools and the secondary schools where possible. As a result, like you said, we feel confident that we are able to accommodate about 80% of first through third grade families. Some schools are going to be able to accommodate all first, second, and third grade families on site at the home school. And to your example, Hillcrest, we were thinking our oldest in that group, our third graders, could potentially use the space at Drexel Hill Middle School, as it's right down the street from Hillcrest, and we would use that space for our tutoring services. The next step would be, in terms of, we've already identified the capacity, the next step would be to secure the personnel to be able to adequately staff these programs. And we're going to move ahead, like you said, with that plan. I have a meeting scheduled with Dr. Council and Craig Rogers for tomorrow to move forward with that plan, and we hope to be able to report out more information in the near future.
Now, Frank, I just want to point something out, and you had shared this with me on a phone call today, and you can maybe bring this up. My understanding is that some local daycares right now, if students actually attend, and I want to be clear, is what I'm hearing and information I'm receiving, not confirmed yet. We're going to look into it. But if students attend any in-person schooling, they will not be allowed to attend their local daycare. Is that correct?
Dr. McGarry, can I speak to that?
Yes, that'd be great.
I'm not going to mention any particular daycares, but I know one in particular we're doing as far as our plan, and they were trying to make plans surrounding that. So they knew that it was a half day, so they've been calling parents to say, we'll provide transportation for the other half day. So they're planning around that. So I'm not sure what the other daycares are doing, but this particular daycare that I know about is trying to collaborate with the half days for the elementary school.
Great. We're going to have to keep following what's true or not true to make sure we stay on top of it. So, Gina, thank you for pointing that out. The latest conversation emails we received today is some parents saying that might not be an option for them if we attend in person. So, again, just to emphasize, at this point in time, the district is still approved to move forward with a flexible model. And the latest information we've had on the state level is that we do not believe there'll be a push from the governor or the Secretary of Education to close schools for virtual only. It really is more of a local decision.
Okay, our next comment is from Shannon Haslett, located at 716 Collinbrook Avenue in Drexel Hill. Comment received tonight at 5:43 via email, addressing agenda item 3.1. Comment begins. First question, how do you expect parents to be comfortable with in-person learning for this coming school year while you are still continuing to do virtual school board meetings? And if it is I'm going to have to read this the way I believe she intended. And if it is your intent to keep the numbers under 25 again, how do you plan on opening in-person learning? Clearly, there will be more than 25 people in the building. Second question, why are some playgrounds not taped up and unusable while others within the district are not? For example, the baby playground at Aronimink is open and swings are down and you can play, but yet the big playground at Aronimink is still taped up. When do you plan on opening them back up? Why not just post signs stating the equipment is not sterilized, play at your own risk, if it is an issue of cleaning the equipment? End of comment. So Dr. McGarry and Mr. Rogers, for a response, please.
Yes, the playgrounds should be open for this summer. If we do open the school year for in-person, we'll make decisions depending on what's going on in the county at that time and the community at that time. So I talked to Craig Rogers already today. We're going to find out if there is still tape or caution tape around some of those playgrounds, and we'll address that. But it's not for a fear of keeping them clean. If need be, we'll make sure that we address that. As far as the board meetings are concerned, I think this is an important point of clarity that will come up regarding sports as well. But as far as 25 people in a room, it is true. And my recommendation to the board, and the board can certainly make their own decision, I work for the board, that we can't have 25 people in one space. So reopening schools, we can't put 25 kids in a classroom, but a board meeting would bring far more than 25 people in. And I think that, continuing in a virtual setting until those guidelines of more than 25 people in a space at a time makes sense for us to continue to do virtual meetings. Now, if the board would like to have the board seated, socially distanced in a meeting, that might be difficult to cover with cameras. We could certainly discuss it. But my superintendent's recommendation would be to continue to hold virtual meetings because board meetings bring in more than 25 people at a clip. And by holding these virtual meetings, we're getting, I believe right now, a lot of people engaged in questions and feedback, and I think we've done a good job managing that. So bringing students back in school, we would not be putting more than 25 kids in a classroom at a time, and that's the reason why we're keeping board meetings virtual.
Okay, our next question is from Vincent Casso, located at 953 Cobb Street in Upper Darby, received tonight at 8:39 p.m. Via email addressing item number 3.2. Comment begins, hello, my name is Vincent Casso. I reside at 953 Cobb Street. I have two daughters, one at UDHS and one at DHMS. Can you explain to me why they are assigned different cohorts than what is shown on the cohort mapping system? My daughters would like to be in the cohorts they were assigned to on their maps so they can be with their peers. I have attached the maps for your review. Gia Casso cohort on map, yet, and let me read this as he intended. Gia Casso's cohort on the map, yet is on the map, yet she was placed in a different cohort. She should be in 02. And Mr. Casso also attached for us screenshots of the interactive cohort maps. End of comment. Let me just add one more thing, that Principal Simone and Dr. Alloway, Principal of DHMS, have addressed this parent's concerns and contacted the parent. The parent responded, and his questions were addressed by administration.
Ron, I just want to add also to that at each level, the cohorts will not be the same. So as Tim Lambert explained, the AM have their own, the elementary schools have their own cohorts, the middle schools have their own cohorts, and the high school have their own cohorts. So it could be a situation where different grade levels are in the same house, but the map is divided differently to meeting social distancing, and at the high school in particular, the course requests that went into play. So each level has a different map and a different cohort assigned based on the educational needs.
Okay, next question. From Megan Poole, located at 467 Turner Avenue in Drexel Hill, received this afternoon at 2:06 via email addressing agenda item 3.1. Comment begins, my name is Megan Poole. I'm trying to get in touch with someone in regards to distance learning for my children this coming school year. Due to COVID and health concerns, mine and my kids, I think she intended me and my kids, the boys, have asthma. It is in my family's best interest that we do distance learning. I did not receive the email to sign up Thursday and Friday. Offices are closed. I called all day today and no one has been able to help me. My children are, and she lists her children, at Upper Darby High School, Drexel Hill, Hillcrest, and another student at Hillcrest. Any help in this matter would be greatly appreciated. We did receive this parent's email, and the survey deadline was closed on July 18th, 2020. Dr. McGarry, can you respond to this?
Sure. I just want to say hi to the family. Felix is an excellent little baseball player, and looking forward to him being a high school baseball player here in Upper Darby. He's a great little player. Ms. Poole, like I said earlier on, don't stress. We'll work with you. I know Mr. Salerno and Mr. McEady will be able to contact you. We wanted to have that deadline to make sure that we could better evaluate the number of families and staffing that we would need to provide synchronous and asynchronous work. While that deadline was important for us, if you don't feel safe with your students attending school, you have an option to pull your students out for a virtual model. It's more about bringing the students in to the in-person that we would need much more advanced notice. But, don't stress. If your focus is on having your students in a virtual model, we'll definitely be able to accommodate and work with you to make sure that happens.
Okay, our next comment is from Cynthia Isles, located at 7611 Parkview Road in Upper Darby. Comment received at 1:53 a.m. today via email, agenda item 3.1. Comment begins, will the district provide the following supports for virtual-only students? Number 1, laptop accessories, headsets with mics, writing pad, mouse. Number 2, reading books outside of textbooks. Number 3, internet stipends or supports. Number 4, science kit experiments. Number 5, music instruments and supplies. Number 6, art supplies. Number 7, physical education supplies. Number 8, virtual extracurricular activities such as music lessons, drama clubs, science clubs, etc. Will parents have the option to change cohorts or to request specific cohorts based on their needs, family schedules, childcare, etc.? Question 3, with the number of COVID cases on a steady rise and 1 million new cases occurring within days, is the district prepared to be completely virtual for the upcoming school year? And is there a plan or a date for a final determination for the reopening plan? End of comment.
I'll take the first, and then Frank and Christine and Greg can certainly jump in. So let me go through this. Laptops, we've been working hard using grant money to try to provide every student, kindergarten through 12th grade, with a laptop. That is still our game plan. I can't emphasize enough, however, that the district is really putting a lot of money into going one-to-one and really accelerating this as a result of the pandemic. But we need parents to make sure that they know that we need to return those at the end of the learning. We still need to get some of our laptops back from last school year to get them updated and get them back out to our families. So please get the laptops back to us so we can get them back out to you. But yes, we will be providing laptops. As far as accessories are concerned, if students are in need of special education or resources, please contact our special education department, and we will certainly provide you with the appropriate assistive technology in accordance with the IEP. As far as providing everybody with headsets, mics, writing pads, and a mouse, that is not something financially we're able to provide at this time. We are going to provide a laptop, however. We will certainly be providing resources and textbooks as we did during the closure, and a lot of our resources should be able to be provided virtually as well with the new curriculum that we've purchased. We will not be able to provide internet stipends or payment to families financially for that, but we will be working with local internet providers to try to provide inexpensive internet, keep you informed on that, and if hotspots are necessary, the district will try to work with families as well. Items 4, 5, 6, and 7 are items that we've been talking about last year and going into this school year. Ms. Kelly and Mr. Salerno and I will be looking into how we can try to have opportunities for parents to drive by and pick up resources for art and potentially science kits in the spring, because if we do spring in the second half of the year virtually, we'd like to provide some opportunities for students to do some science at home, some art at home, if we can. And that would be a situation where we'd have to coordinate with you for parents to kind of schedule a pickup at the buildings to do that. That's tentative at this time, but we would like to try to provide science experiments and art supplies for students to be able to do those things at home, as well as music instruments and supplies if they are something the parent needs to participate in some of those programs. As far as extracurricular activities are concerned, we could only really provide in-person extracurricular activities in the flexible model, and that was our game plan to be able to provide that. At this point in time, let me give you an example. Something like volleyball would be very difficult to pull off because you still can't have 25 people in a space at a time, but yet the PIAA has not canceled fall sports yet for the fall. So those are things we're going to have to work through. As far as extracurriculars, clubs, science clubs, we will be working with teachers to provide them virtually in an all-virtual model. If we were back for the model that we've picked so far, which is a flexible cohort model, we were going to have plans to allow for students to participate in clubs after school, socially distanced, meeting the requirements that we have in place. Again, option number 2, as far as the switching cohorts, no. We will not be allowing parents to switch cohorts. At this point in time, that is something that we will not be allowing to happen. Please contact myself, Dr. Manfrey or Mr. Salerno if you have any questions or concerns, but we will not be changing cohorts. It creates a lot of complications regarding scheduling and transportation, and I know that's probably not a popular answer, but changing cohorts is very, very complicated for us to do with a number of requests of constantly changing. It becomes very difficult for us to do that. Other questions that are on the table for us tonight regarding this email. Yes, we've already discussed question number 3, yet we will be prepared to open virtually if that's the case. At this point in time, we have not made that decision, but that will be something that we're looking at and potentially discussing at the next August board meeting. Frank and Christine, I don't know if I covered everything. You can certainly jump in.
I think you covered it, Dan. I think we're making changes to the schedule and the flexible schedule option. Specifically, you mentioned trying to front load science for all grades 1 through 5 for that very reason, knowing that that's much more hands-on, with the hopes that if we're back in the spring, we'll be able to do this in person to a certain extent. So we're going to have social studies happening for all students in grades 1 through 5 during the first semester for that very reason.
I also want to say regarding this comment that Mr. Salerno actually emailed this parent prior to the meeting to address her concerns. Our next comment is from Melissa Baldwin, located at 328 North Oak Avenue in Clifton Heights. Comment was received on the 28th at 9:27 a.m. via email addressing item number 3.1. Comment begins, will there be before and after care available through the recreation department like there had been prior to COVID? There was mention of possibly having child care available during morning and afternoon sessions. Has a final decision been made on this? Finally, I want to thank everyone for working so hard putting everything together for this upcoming school year. You are doing everything to keep our children, teachers, and staff safe and healthy. I'm sure it wasn't easy. End of comment. Dan, did you want to address this? Dan, Frank, or
Yeah.
Craig?
Yeah, so I think we already touched on Mrs. Baldwin, who's also involved actively in the Homeland School District, Homeland School. I know that we touched on the daycare, and yes, Ms. Baldwin, we still are considering the KinderCares program for daycare. That's still an opportunity, and Craig Rogers and I will be meeting with our KinderCare program to see how we can continue to pull that off for kindergarten. And then as we discussed, first through third grade, we do have a game plan to provide tutoring either in the AM or the PM, whatever the off session is for first through third graders to parents. And we will be posting and potentially going through interviews to see who would like to help us be hired to provide those resources in the flexible cohort model.
Okay, our next question. Our next comment is from Akila Canty, located at 3833 Marshall Road in Drexel Hill. Comment received on the 28th at 2:28 p.m. via email addressing agenda item 3.1. Comment begins, will students be allowed to wear a face shield instead of a mask? UDSD daycare. What are the options for AM/PM daycare? Will families that were previously signed up for the 2020-2021 school year be contracted? End of comment. Dr. McGarry, Dr. Manfrey, would you care to answer?
Yeah, I think we touched on the AM and PM daycare aspect of it. I will be the one to make the decision about the mask for the group right now. It's in our health plan approved by the board. At 6 feet in the classroom, when students are participating in learning, we will not be requiring a mask of our students. Our staff will have a mask and a shield. We would like our teachers to wear a shield and a mask for their protection. Somebody's mic is open, I think, right now. Teachers will also have over 200 square feet around them at a minimum, providing them safety and support. And in the cohort model, teachers will certainly have plenty of distance and space between them and still with the students in a classroom. When students leave the classroom for any reason in the hallway or common areas or on transportation, masks will be required. Students who do not follow the mask requirements, we will probably be looking at those students and those parents and asking them to move into a virtual setting if they do not comply with the mask wearing, especially in common areas. That's important. So for students, we'll be requiring it in everywhere, buses, common places, and in transition, where transition takes place. But in the classroom, at 6 feet, when students are participating in learning, we will not require the mask at 6 feet. When students go below 6 feet for any reason, masks will be required, and students who are not willing to comply with that will probably be asked to move into a virtual setting. Now, the state of Pennsylvania, just to be clear to this parent and to the public, does provide an opt-out for parents who do not want their students to wear a mask in that situation, and we'll address that with those parents and those families on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, our next comment is from Michelle Palladino. We do not have an address on file, so as per board policy, we cannot read this comment for public record. We did send an email to her requesting her address. We will come back to it if we receive it before the end of the general comments. The next comment is from Jamar Hatton, located at 821 Mason Avenue in Drexel Hill. Comment received at 7:28 at 5:45 p.m. via email, addressing agenda item 3.1. Comment begins, I'm a father of 2 kids at Hillcrest Elementary, one entering kindergarten and the other entering 2nd grade. At first, my wife and I did not want to do the all virtual option, but after a lot more thought and more information, virtual seems like a safer, more viable option for us. We know the deadline has passed, but would like to know if there is still an opportunity to choose the all virtual option to start the school year. End of comment. This comment was addressed prior to the email by Mr. Salerno, and Mr. McEady was also involved in that conversation. Principal McEady. Dan, did you want to address this again? I know that it was addressed during the meeting.
You know, again, just to remind parents that whenever we pick these cohorts, we're sticking to the cohorts that we have. But parents who do want to elect for the virtual option only, have that opportunity to do so. When we have students who want to return for in-person, we ask that happens at a break because that will prepare us some more time to do it. So to be clear, we are still building our cohorts so that when we do return for in-person instruction, we're able to meet the social distancing guidelines at that time.
Dr. McGarry, this is Dr. Manfrey. I think that Frank may be, Mr. Salerno may be experiencing some technical difficulty, just as an FYI. But I believe the parent was asking if it's too late for them to opt for the virtual setting. And I think previously you've discussed how we are going to work with parents to make sure that if they prefer the virtual setting, that we would accommodate them as much as possible. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, Dr. Manfrey, this is Frank Salerno. I'm sorry I was having problems. I did correspond with this parent prior to the start of the meeting as the question came in, and he already responded saying that he appreciates the information, and Principal McEady has also already followed up. So I think this question has been addressed.
Also, just as a follow-up, students can wear shields and a mask as well. They can wear either one, but the mask seems to be just as important, and for our teachers, we'd emphasize both as well.
Our next comment is from Nicholas Hoyt, located at 300 Edmonds Avenue. Comment received on the 28th at 5:37 p.m. via email. No agenda item was addressed. However, from his comments, it seems to be about the return to school, the pandemic return to school. Comment begins, before I get into it, I want to commend all of you with the unenviable task of rebooting the school year. Whatever was chosen, I'm sure a large percentage of parents would have had a gripe. So before moving forward, thanks for putting forth the plan, and hopefully we can all return to normal, whatever that may be, sooner than later. Despite the uncertainty of what a return to school might be, I'm still looking to conduct an annual back-to-school cleanup. While I am hammering out details as we speak, if things move forward in a positive manner, I would hope that as many volunteers as possible can come forth for the kids in our community on Saturday, August 29th from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. While UDSD is cleaning up the buildings and campuses of our schools, I would like to assemble volunteers to help pick up litter in the surrounding neighborhoods of those schools so that all of the kids in Upper Darby School District can start the school year in as clean as environment as possible. End of comment. Dr. McGarry, would you like to address?
Yeah, we'll reach out to Mr. Hoyt. Right now, in normal circumstances, we'd all be supportive as we have of doing this. We certainly want to keep our schools and our neighborhood clean, regardless of being, in session this summer or starting a school year. I think we have to be cautious and careful about how we go about doing this, but we'll certainly reach out to Mr. Hoyt and provide this opportunity to try to clean up the school area and the neighborhood area over there as well.
Our next comment is from Gia Hoffman. We do not have her address on file. We did reach out to her via email to request it. As per board policy, we're not permitted to read this comment for public record. The next comment is from Sandy Neese, located at 202 Wattis Avenue in Upper Darby. The email was received on the 28th at 6:36 p.m. via email addressing agenda item 3.1. Comment begins, numerous questions have been asked about special programs during the various meetings and forums over the past several months. However, answers have not been provided or included on the FAQ. Is there any plan to do a Zoom meeting for families with special ed students as other districts are doing? Whether the district goes in person or virtual, there are questions that need to be answered by parents of special needs students. End of comment. Dr. McGarry, would you care to address?
Yeah, one of our biggest concerns, as I said at the opening of schools, special education is going to be another area where we know we have students whose evaluations need to be taken care of. No matter what model that we're in, we're obligated to meet FAPE. So our game plan will still be to service the needs of our students, all students in the school district, and provide them the best education that we can. And our expectations for the teaching and learning, this goes back to Mr. Field's question earlier, are going to have to increase, especially in a virtual model. If we go all virtual, no matter what, we will have direct instruction being provided, and IEPs will have to be met. And just to be clear, if we go to a virtual model, there'll be a 5-day-a-week instruction for students, and we'll be talking about what that looks like if it's a virtual start to the school year. Nonetheless, special education and FAPE, a free and appropriate public education, will be provided to students in that model. There will be an opportunity. We'll work with whatever the law tells us to do as far as providing Zoom meetings to meet the needs of our students in a special education setting and their families. I know that there is a need for certain evaluations to take place, and we'll have to work through those with our families and our special education department. But yes, FAPE and providing our special education students with what they need is a priority, and we'll make sure that we do that.
Our next comment or question is from Ryan Leroy Golden, located at 5115 Township Line Road in Drexel Hill. Comment received on the 28th at 6:41 p.m. via email addressing agenda item 3.1. Comment begins, I have a question regarding the potential shift to 100% online learning. If the district goes full virtual, would there be an opportunity for students to meet with teachers in person beforehand to level set student expectations for online learning? End of comment. Dr. McGarry, Mr. Salerno, Dr. Manfrey?
So I'm just trying to make sure I understand the question, Aranda. The question is, if the district goes virtual, would there be an opportunity for students to meet with teachers in person beforehand to level set student expectations? So what we're going to do, I hope I'm gathering this question appropriately. If not, the parent can email me or the community member can email me. We're going to, again, go out with our expectations of what virtual learning will look like. If we're full virtual, for example, we're going to put out our student expectations to our parents and our students, and our teacher expectations to our teachers like we did during the closure. We'll make it clear what the expectations and the student day will be. We certainly, one example would be at Upper Darby High School, classes are a block schedule. It's not a best practice to have 80 minutes of virtual instruction. So we'd probably be looking at AM sessions with a PM asynchronous and catch up on work with some synchronous lessons in the afternoon as well. But we have to be mindful that you can't stick a student, kindergarten through 12th grade, on a computer for 7.5 to 8 straight hours. So we'll come out with what our expectations are, behavior, as far as also logging into the lessons, and what teacher expectations will be, and we'll put that on a district level. And then we'll encourage our teachers to make sure that they set those expectations with students prior to and at the conclusion of each session.
Dan, it's Frank Salerno. May I comment on that as well?
Go right ahead.
I think the community member could also be asking, since we are not going to have much time at all, if any, in front of students if we go all virtual, if we could somehow bring the students in live in person to be able to walk them through the expectations and how to interact with the teachers virtually. And I believe if we're making a decision, not that we have already, but if we are making a decision to not go live in person for in the spirit of safety, then that probably would not be an option. We would have to do our best to provide those tutorials to our families and our students virtually.
Correct.
Okay, our next comment is from Kelly Bowie, located at 709 Central Avenue in Clifton Heights. Comment received on the 28th at 6:48 p.m. via email. She did not include an agenda item. It seems as though it does have to do with our pandemic reopening of schools. Comment begins, I just want to say thank you for the hard work on trying to figure out what is best for our kids. I'd also like to say I'm frankly appalled that only 15% of the district parents respond to the surveys, especially when there is so much said over social media. End of comment.
All I can say is I think a lot of families are nervous and stressed out, and we want to encourage people to continue to reach out to us and respond to surveys when we can. It's also important that I think people are just nervous that they felt that if they picked one or the other and things change, what would happen to their kids. So, we respect and I appreciate the comments supporting the school district. We'll certainly take those, but we have to make sure that we also are aware that people are nervous, and they were worried that if I picked one, that I was committed to that, and I couldn't flex out one way or the other. We have to be flexible. I want to keep emphasizing this is going to be imperfect for a period of time. And to the parents that are watching us, stick with us and we'll stick with you. We're going to do the best that we can. We need you to stay with us and keep your kids in our school district too, because our teachers do a great job. So let's all work together.
Our next comment is from Joanne Namavong, located at 133 North Pinnock Avenue in Upper Darby. Comment was received on the 28th at 7:07 p.m. via email addressing agenda item 3.1. Comment begins. The email received this afternoon from Ms. Buford seems to indicate that the board, based on emails sent to assistant principals from many parents, is leaning toward taking away our in-person instruction. Those who want all virtual have that opportunity, and those of us who want our children in school should not be discounted because we may not be as vocal. Please continue with the plan you voted on and approved in the July 14th, 2020 board meeting. End of comment. And she's referencing the parent link, Dr. McGarry.
Yes, I asked Mrs. Buford today. I had a conversation with Mrs. Buford, and I also was in contact with Board President Brown because we're receiving what I believe are stock emails and kind of a chain of emails asking us not to open. I think they're being received by many school districts. I think it's a national movement, not just a local movement. And Mrs. Namavong, I would say I appreciate you've always been somebody that reaches out and definitely tells us your opinion, and I appreciate that. I would like to say that the biggest issue right now, however, is staffing our buildings. I want to continue to emphasize that. Without clear guidance and clear safety, our teachers could potentially become sick, and if we can't staff our schools, in-person instruction might not be a reality. I have made it clear I do believe some form of in-person instruction is good for our kids and important for our community, but we're going to stay tuned and listen to our parents, listen to our community, and also our teachers, and pay attention to what the current trends are. Health is very serious. The safety is very serious for our teachers and our students. So we right now are sticking with our July 14th plan, but if things continue to evolve and our staff are not able to return or teach our students, and a high number of students are not willing to return to school, we may have to change direction.
Our next comment is from Michelle Fitzpatrick, located at 908 Roberts Avenue in Drexel Hill. Comment was received on the 28th at 7:08 p.m. via email addressing agenda item 3.3. Comment begins, and it's not complete, so I will stop where she stops and then I'll complete what I think she means. Comment begins, if we are all virtual to start the school year, will this mean that sports and clubs postponed or canceled until? And I think she means until further notice. End of comment. Dr. McGarry, did you want to address the PIAA FAQ?
Yeah, I provided Ms. Buford with the PIAA FAQ that came out today. Mrs. Buford posted it on our website, so Mrs. Fitzpatrick, you can certainly refer to that. You can see the ambiguity and frustration, I think, when you read that document. Here's where we are as far as extracurriculars, space, indoor and outdoor. There has not been a clear, definitive answer on sports for the fall. As we're watching Major League Baseball and professional sports struggle with some of the best and most amount of money put into making them happen. An example, the Marlins, the baseball team, had 17 professional athletes test positive for COVID-19. We do not have a definitive answer on a return to sports or extracurriculars at this time. If we are having any kind of education and we're able to do it, we're going to try to do it. At this point in time, however, in the FAQ, the example that I highlighted earlier talks about volleyball. If you can only have 25 individuals in one space at one time, certain indoor athletic events like wrestling or volleyball or other sports will require more than 25 people. What is the direction for school districts to hold those events? Again, this could become a Title IX violation if some sports are allowed to happen for men and women they're not. That becomes an issue. So we're going to handle this on a case-by-case situation, and it might get to a point where Upper Darby School District has to say yes or no on our own because it doesn't seem like there's going to be clear guidance. To be clear, we also have to make sure that we communicate with the PIAA on any decisions we make regarding a sports season, canceling a sports season or not participating, and we would obviously make that public and have that conversation with the board before we do it. So as far as extracurriculars and sports are concerned, it's a stay tuned until we get more information. The FAQ provides you some updates. At this point in time, I do not have a clear, definitive answer. I'd like one, but I don't have one at this time.
Our next comment is from Samantha Tarcia, located at 200 Brenton Road in Upper Darby. Comment was received on the 28th at 7:21 via email addressing agenda item 3.1. Comment begins. I realize there are numerous small details to be worked out within the virtual learning module. A big factor for my family regarding going to a cyber charter versus staying at Upper Darby is the attention my daughter has to meet her IEP. She typically goes to a learning support group twice a week for a half hour. Once the pandemic hit, the time and attention she received was extremely limited. This has left her severely behind when she is already behind her typical peers. Has there been any thought to how learning support would be supported by a virtual model? Thank you very much for your time. End of comment. Mr. Marshallek is out of town. He is he handles our special education assistant superintendent of student services. Dr. McGarry, Dr. Manfrey, Mr. Salerno, would you address?
Yeah, go ahead, Greg. You guys.
I'm sorry, Dr. McGarry. I just wanted to say that you know, if we do move forward, and I'm not sure if the question is regarding full virtual or flexible cohort model, but in either of those models, the intention is for us to be much more rigorous and much more conscious of everyone's needs and making sure that we're providing a much better synchronous model than we did during the initial closure. I know that Mr. Marshallak and his team have been working very hard to ensure that that happens for our learning support students and all of our students in our special education programs. Sorry, go ahead, Dr. McGarry.
I just want to make sure everybody's crystal clear, too, on this. There has not been an announcement like there was on March 13th where everything shut down so abruptly. And that, I think, really made that even more complicated. There would, at this point in time, even if we shifted to virtual learning only, which we have not, you could still have opportunities where we might be asking a parent and a student to come in for some kind of a testing in person because we still have the ability to do that. The governor has not shut down schools. That would be a local decision, it sounds like, if we were to go virtually only. The other comment that I want to make is, you know, we're going to do our best to make sure that we provide small group instruction or tutoring or those resources for the students. I think Dr. Manfrey nailed it. From March 13th on, you know, that was a best effort to turn it around. Our expectation is going to be much more substantial instruction and support for students, especially special education students, all students for that matter. Whether we're doing our cohort model or our virtual model, our teachers know they have to instruct and provide a better level of education than we did. Here's the only concern I have to all the parents and community members that are out there, to be realistic though. If every school district goes virtual only, and this is why I'm concerned about that model being selected, the teachers and folks who have kids at home will also then have to make sure that they're keeping up with their own children and their own schoolwork with their own children. And I think we have to be realistic of each other about what does that look like. So I'm still leaning toward more of the flexible cohort because it still allows kids to touch at some time with our parents, getting a chance to get a break and catch their breath. And our teachers providing that expertise. But if more school districts pick virtual only, Upper Darby will ultimately be forced into a virtual only model because our staff will have to be home with their own children.
Our next comment is from Wendy George, located at 111 Abbey Terrace in Drexel Hill. Comment received on the 28th at 7:27 p.m. via email addressing agenda item 3.1. Comment begins, if the school district changes to all virtual, will synchronous learning, live instruction with teachers still take place? End of comment.
Yes.
Dr. McGarry, did you want to? Yes, because yes, we've addressed that several times.
Yeah, the answer is yes.
Yes. Next comment. Joe Clark and Sadie Thomas, located at 75 Houston Road in Lansdowne. This comment was received on the 28th at 7:39 p.m. via email, agenda item 3.1. comment begins, we have 3 concerns about the coming school year. The first is the flexible schedule with half day in session. Why is it that the full special ED students who often have other complications that make them compromised have full day in school session while the generally healthy students have to do this flexible schedule? The second question is that we haven't heard anything about planning for IEP. What will the plan be for IEP students who need extra help? Will they also be attending full day classes, or will they just be left behind? The third question being that no one is even discussing the possibility of full in-school education. The CDC has recently released data in addition to a statement suggesting regular full day in-school education, noting that the risk for students would be very low. Our children need the structure and the many other things that in-school learning provides. Many of our children are struggling with virtual learning or flat out refusing to do it, and will likely fall very far behind without traditional learning. The remainder of last school year was terrible for some of us. For us personally, our kindergartner had a very difficult time with virtual learning. He did not like it, he did not understand some of it, and some things he would completely refuse to do. He wanted time with his teacher, but unfortunately they were not allowed to do meetings through either Google Meet or Zoom. We thought this was a district-wide issue and later found out that some schools had this while others did not. This doesn't even cover the multitude of issues with Schoology, which seem to be an overall failure throughout much of the county and region. We hope the district will reconsider its plans for the coming school year, especially given the pending stimulus funding expected to be released to assist schools in opening in full while doing their best to comply with guidelines. End of comment. Dr. McGarry, did you want to address that?
Sure. I'll try to go point by point if I can quickly. I think if we keep going back to March 13th, we're going to get lost. Our game plan is we're going to do a better job regardless than we did on March 13th of this past school year. The reason why we're looking to bring in specific special education students whose needs are very, very substantial, and it's important, they also have health needs, we agree with that. The concern is that some of the needs of those students are very difficult to meet in a virtual model, and we feel that giving them 4 days of in-person full day is best for their families and those students. Obviously, we will have students in those programs, autistic support, multi-disabled students, so life skills, autistic support, multi-disabled students, whose parents may opt for a virtual only, and they can certainly opt for virtual only in the cohort that we created. We did feel that bringing those students in 4 days a week will be best for those students and their families, giving them the best education that we can. The second item was, I believe, for special education students that fall into the category of specific learning disabled regarding reading, math, writing, those specific skills. Many of those students are fully included with their peers, and those students that are fully included in their peers, we believe that attending some in-person sessions and some synchronous and asynchronous work is better, far better than the work that we did on March 13th for the end of the year. The instruction will definitely be much more substantial. As far as the third item, we did consider a full return. As a superintendent of the school district, we could not meet any of the CDC recommendations of a full return. And the Department of Education has made it clear that there's no such thing as below going to 3 feet. They made it clear that they'd like to see school districts get to 6 feet. And that's why we made the model that we did, going as close to 6 feet, if not always at 6 feet, and bringing cohorts of students in. It would not be a recommendation of this administration and clearly our board to bring all students back all at one time to regular instruction for the school year. We just did not see that that was a viable option. And then as far as the comment about Google Meet or Zoom, this seems to be a misunderstanding. Some teachers, I guess, took it upon themselves that they did not want to teach virtually. I can be rest assured that next school year, our expectation is that teachers will be having live synchronous sessions via Google Meet or Zoom, and that those sessions will really be something that are not up for discussion. Teachers should be providing live synchronous work to all students throughout the school district. We understand Schoology had some issues last year, but I think a lot of systems, not just Schoology, were overwhelmed by the sheer volume of people moving to a virtual platform. We do not anticipate that happening this year. Nonetheless, if there are issues, we'll be ready to make a shift and a move if we have to.
Next comment is from Lanisa Dixon, located at 3844 Ann Street in Drexel Hill, received on the 28th at 8:09 p.m. Via voicemail, which was transferred into an email. This is regarding Agenda Item 3.1. Comment begins, I have two questions regarding transportation if we have the hybrid or cohort models. My daughter received transportation during 6th and 7th grade, but it looks like she will not be receiving transportation this year. Is it because of the hybrid model? My son has an IEP and received curb-to-curb pickup and drop-off in his IEP. Would this continue during the hybrid model? End of question. Again, Mr. Marshallek is not available tonight to respond to that. Would Dr. McGarry, Dr. Manfrey, or Mr. Salerno care to answer?
Yeah, so here's where we are. The reality is anybody who needs that level of transportation, if it's in an IEP and it's necessary, that will still be happening. But we did make this clear in our work and fine-tuning with this team that's in place here in the school district over the last 2 years. We discovered that there are some students who have been getting transportation that should not be getting transportation. And yes, that's a reality of what we've not only found in this pandemic, but in a review of our budget, in a review of our process and procedures, not just because of COVID-19. There are students who should not be getting a bus and will no longer be getting a bus. But as far as a special education student who has been getting a bus, that special education student will still be getting a bus.
Our next comment is from Akila Canty, located at 3833 Marshall Road in Drexel Hill. Comment received on the 28th at 8:48 p.m. via email addressing Agenda Item 3.1. Comment begins, I understand the tutoring options for grades 1 through 3. What are the options for grades 4th and 5th? I have a 3rd grader and a 5th grader. I can't have one going to tutoring and the other have no care option. Previously, both were enrolled for care due to work schedules. End of comment.
To address that point, we are targeting 1st through 3rd grade families for our tutoring options, but as Dr. McGarry mentioned, we are hopeful that depending on the response that we get, and if we're opening at the flexible schedule model, there are a number of families who are still going to opt for the virtual-only model, creating additional space for us to accommodate hopefully some 4th and 5th grade families on a case-by-case situation. So at this time, while we're targeting 1st through 3rd grade, the response to this question would be our hope is that we would be able to introduce the idea of accommodating 4th and 5th grade families as well once we have a better idea of how many families are choosing the virtual-only option.
Final comment from Alicia and Craig Toll, located at 7820 Beverly Road in Upper Darby. Comment was received on the 28th at 9:10 p.m. via email, Agenda Item 3.1. Comment begins, thank you for all your hard work and dedication. We know how difficult this is to plan for so many families. Question, will there be resources provided to parents to assist with virtual learning? As we were thrown into this in March, now that there has been more time allotted to virtual learning, I think the parents would benefit from additional resources to ensure our children are learning at the best of their abilities. End of comment and question.
Yeah, Christine, I know you're there. We're going to provide some tutorials and some how-tos for parents at home and some suggestions, and we're working on those now. Christine?
Yes, that's correct, Dr. McGarry. So what our team is working on right now are finalizing the plans for the students and what their exact lesson plans will look like and synchronous learning opportunities. And then what we're doing with that is we're building the parent lessons as well. And what we were hoping to do is record those lessons and then have live sessions for parents to ask any questions that they may have. And we'll stagger them throughout the day, having a morning session, an afternoon, and an evening session involving our instructional coaches, our district supervisors, and any other people that we would need.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Thank you, Dr. McGarry. That is the end of the comments we have of our general comments. Mr. Brown?
Ms. Carey, you want to have Mrs. Kelly review the agenda items, please?
Yes, thank you, President Brown. Ms. Kelly, would you please review the agenda items for the Education and Pupil Services meeting? And thank you for everyone's patience.
Thank you, Mrs. Curry. The first item was informational. It was the 2021 reopening of schools. The second item was the 2021 adjusted district calendars, which will require board action. And again, board action is moving the item forward to the August board meeting for a vote. Are we okay with moving the one-page calendar and professional development calendar for August through January forward?
Yes.
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 The third item is the Flexible Instructional Day. Again, this was part of Act 64 of 2019, where the resolution has to be submitted to PDE to allow for flexible instructional days to occur. This will require board action, again, moving it forward to the August vote.
Yes.
Is everyone okay for moving it forward?
Yes.
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 Yes. Anyone not okay with moving it forward? Okay, thank you.
The fourth item had many parts. I was asking for approval to move Nearpod forward, as well as the online textbooks for math and the tech ed department. Are we okay with moving those items forward, or we'd like to take them one by one? Or, again, they were being paid out of Act 30 money. No district funding was being used.
Move forward.
Yes.
Move forward.
Yes.
Move forward.
Yes.
Anyone not okay with moving forward? Okay, thank you, Ms. Kelly.
Yes.
The fifth item was the addition of Juneteenth into our social studies curriculum, so a planned proposal for moving of instruction and some standards. Is everyone okay with moving that forward?
Yes.
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 And then number 6 were our policies, both informational this evening.
Okay.
So at this
thank you very
point,
much.
Mr. Brown, I believe we're at the end of our
Yes,
meeting.
thank you.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Kelly. President Brown would like to turn it back over to you.
Thank you. A motion is in order for adjournment of the Education and Pupil Services Committee meeting.
Second. David Neal.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned. Have a good night, everyone.